Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's public listening session regarding service on the CSX Transportation Rail Network. The board has been closely monitoring the performance of CSX since the summer after learning of growing rail service problems resulting from operating changes at CSX. The board's Rail Customer and Public Assistance Office, in particular, has been very busy, and I want to thank the RCPA staff for their efforts working with shippers and CSX to help resolve service issues and ensure critical deliveries to the extent possible. Through the board's communications with CSX, both formally through letters and more informally through phone calls, the board's foremost objective has been to ensure that rail service problems are addressed as quickly as possible. Some time has passed since the original date of this session was planned we postponed it due to Hurricane Irma. It is our hope that we will hear of considerable improvements today from both CSX and its customers, as well as imminent solutions to any of the remaining challenges, and there are some. We also expect to hear that mistakes along the way, such as a lack of communication between CSX and shippers, are not going to be repeated going forward. While the format today may appear hearing-like, it is really only for organizational purposes. We want to hear from all of the participants that signed up. We want to have a dialogue. We want to listen. We hope that you will listen. We don't plan to use the timers, but the day will go quickly, and I'm not using a gavel, so don't do anything to change that plan. We will hear first from CSX about its operating plan changes and its ongoing service recovery efforts. We will then hear from rail shippers and stakeholders to hear about their service experiences with CSX, and then CSX will have an opportunity to respond. For scheduling purposes, around 11:45, we'll assess where we are with the number of speakers and determine whether we should take an hour break for lunch or not, or if we can just forge ahead and finish in the early afternoon. Thank you again for coming today, and I look forward to hearing from each of you that is participating. I'll now turn to my colleague, Vice Chairman Deb Miller, for any of her comments.
Thank you very much, Ann. And again, I want to say welcome. This is an important discussion, and I'm happy to see so many people in the room. I think that everyone here has the same outcome in mind, which should make this a very productive day. We want a great transportation system that serves shippers so that our economy can grow, and that's what we're trying to be sure is happening, and that things are moving well. I hope people in their discussions today will be candid, and along with Ann, I want to say we really wanted to do this in a very informal way. That becomes difficult, but we do want to have as much dialogue and discussion back and forth as we can do today, and we're going to try to do that by listening very carefully to what everybody says and following up with questions when we think that that would be appropriate or helpful. So with that, I think we should just get started. Thank you, Ann.
Great. Our first panel is CSX. Appearing for CSX is their president and CEO, Mr. Hunter Harrison, Cindy Sanborn, Chief Operating Officer, and Bob Frula, who is the Senior Vice President of Network Operations. Thank you very much for coming today.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, for the opportunity, and thank you, Commissioner Miller, for your input so far in trying to tackle some problems that we all share, I think, in common. The first thing I want to make perfectly clear that I'm extremely proud of, and there's some things I'm not so proud of, but the railroad is back running better than it ever has.
Excuse me, Mr. Harrison, I'm not sure if your microphone is on.
There's a button right there. Is the red light on?
Red light's on.
Okay.
Usually it's not a problem, but I'm proud to report that in spite of the facts and the problems we've had, and we talked about during the summer and the end of the summer, that we expected and hoped to be back to a quote normal operation shortly after Labor Day, And there's a lot of hard work that's gone into that. A lot of dialogue with shippers, a lot of hard work, and I think we can say, and I'm a railroader of 50 years. I've been accused of being too hands-on, but I've never been more hands-on than this recent summer of trying to restore this railroad to where it should be without its reputation being tarnished. The third thing is this: if I don't accomplish anything else today, I want to apologize to our valued shippers. Whatever problems we've had internally, we made some mistakes. This is not a failure of precision schedule railroading. I've been doing this for 50 years. That operating plan kept Illinois Central from being the third major bankruptcy in the mid-'70s. It literally turned around Canadian National, that now is the gold standard, and had a huge impact on Canadian Pacific. So it's a tried and true system. Now, people might say, well, what happened to it? Well, what happened to it wasn't the system, it wasn't the architecture, it wasn't the model, it was the execution. And that gets to the people part. So I think that hopefully to give you today some confidence of that we're moving in the right direction, that the ideas are right, is I'd like to offer just a little context on how this operating system evolved. Contrary to popular belief, early in my rail career, and I hate to even say when because it dates me even worse than my physical appearance, but I started reading about this concept of car schedules in 1972. And if I can remember correctly, the research was done from a grant from the FRA, and they did too good a job, and it scared the railroads to death, and it went away and got put away in some file. I was in a middle manager level position then, didn't have a lot of influence on the direction the company I was with at that time was Burlington Northern was going. But I was fascinated by the concept. And then as I moved on up in my career, and I came to reality that what we were doing was wrong in rail. We were running predominantly on volume and volume alone. So volume drove us. The big measures of efficiency were how full are the trains? Are you 96% of capacity, 98% of capacity? Where are you there? So we had no form of service because we didn't know when the capacity was coming, the volume was coming. And at the same time, we were hearing complaints, issues brought up, and we hear the same thing today, and I have some sympathy with that, from the operating craft saying, we don't know when we're going to work. Well, if we don't know when we're going to run the trains, you don't know when you're going to work. Then it kind of dawned on me, but if we don't know when we're going to run the trains, people don't know when they're going to work, how do the customers know when they're going to get their goods? And the answer was they didn't know. Now, to move away from volume and that concept, and rails at that time had really were just growing out of deregulation from staggers. At that point in time, we learned that there might be another way. And so the research said that if we knew the markets better than we thought, predictability. If we went out and looked in the market, saw what the competition was doing, saw what the price was, understood the markets we're trying to serve, that we could be a pretty good forecaster of trains. and the need for the trains and the starts. And if we could predict that, then we could predict people's quality of life. Then we could predict when goods are going to get there. Second heavy point that if I don't make today, precision schedule railroading gives each individual car, a plan, door to door in hours. So, we don't talk internally so much of the one biggest measurement we have is, did the car make its plan that we quoted to the customer? 97 hours, 83 hours, from door to door, gateway to gateway, whatever you would like. Well, as we put that in, we said, well, if we're going to have better service, we could think of maybe gaining market share and maybe gaining a little better price, which sometimes kind of seeps into service issues. But we went with that model of modeling based on that the driving force in precision schedule railroading was to provide service. If you didn't have service, you had nothing. And it all started there. Second value we developed was this: we had to control the cost while we were doing it, because we wanted to stay in business and be able to make a buck. Now we learned a very delicate balance, and you will always in business fight this your careers between cost and service, cost and of the service and the product. This was approached, and the operative word in precision schedule railroading is control cost. Not an axe, not going in and swinging at heads, but the control cost relative to revenues. And if you could keep that balance, provide that level of service, you're on to something. The third big thing, and the issue that when I'm interviewed, they constantly harp on, was of the success this model has had. What's the one, if you had to name one thing that made a significant change in that, and that was clearly asset utilization. I believe, that you can't improve something unless, first of all, you give it recognition, and second, you measure it. Well, we in the rail industry at that period of time did not have measurements for asset utilization. And so as we took this model out of what some people then call them minor leagues with Illinois Central, and did a merger with Canadian National, and started to install that operating plan, I knew that I needed, personally, as going into the new operating chief, I needed a victory, a success, something that said, there's something to this guy besides talk. And we installed schedule railroading in September of '98, and 14 months later, we reduced the locomotive fleet 35%. And people said, if we can do that with locomotives, certainly we can do it with cars, and certainly we can do it with other assets. And then all the accompanying costs. Well, if you have, in that case, 650 less locomotives, you don't need as many parts, labor, material, same way with the car fleet. So it became a very successful operating model, producing low operating ratios, good cash flow, and it became very successful in the market. I think it's fair to say. The fourth portion of this is, which we sometimes don't pay the appropriate attention to, is just simply don't get anybody hurt while you're doing this. Now, we can be very sophisticated, and we can talk about risk management and loss control and programs and processes and so forth. I got blood all over my hands from injuries in this industry that should have been avoidable. And I think these issues of safety never fall to the wayside with us, and they always will be. Now, the fifth thing is the key, and it's where we slipped, and it's where we recognize to some degree the vulnerability of the system, and that's the people, because the people do it. I can write all the great architecture. I can put the X's and O's up there. If I don't have anybody that can pass it and catch it, I can throw it away. The people execute, and the rails that have done the best are the ones that execute day in and day out. And we so many times overlook that. Now, we went into a situation, right or wrong, coming out of a proxy battle, which is not the best environment to start. And shortly before my arrival to CSX, we had taken 1,000 people out of the workforce. It doesn't create real high morale. There's a little bit of protectionism, and also we overlooked the people side of the ledger and didn't execute the way we should have. Hence, we got, at one time, if you look back, when we really kicked in, April, May, producing for record numbers. And then this was continuing, and we went through some resistance, pushback, other areas that were causing significant problems. We got a little ahead of ourselves with the plan, and we got into this slippage. We created a situation which is embarrassing to me with my the little bit of reputation I had. Certainly got tarnished with the service we provided over this 3-month period, which once again I want to apologize about. And that's one reason I refrain a little bit from talking too much about metrics. Because when you talk to the guy at the bakery, he didn't care about our train speed. He cares about getting his flour so he can make the pastries for his customers. And sometimes I think we lose sight of that. The last two things I would tell you about this precision schedule railroad concept. I kind of look at it as a recipe, and we try to say we season those 5 values, those 5 main ingredients, if you will, with 2 things, and that's passion. We say love what you do what you love, or go do something else, and a high degree of integrity. If you question our integrity, you might have to meet us out behind the schoolyard. That's something we take. Having said all of this today, we have made numerous change, but the most significant change we've made is some personnel changes. We have, and we've crossed the board. We found people within our organization, within CSX, that were extremely talented railroaders that had a lot to offer, that had got covered up with, I call, mud. They just got stuck down in the organization. And we have taken the hose to them and washed them off, put them in more responsible positions, and they're producing phenomenal results. We have gone externally and brought in 12, 15 people there. And we've done some of the traditional the campus that you would think of. We're going through, I'm sure you'll probably ask, we have, for now, and maybe forever, I'm not sure what the market's going to bring, we've rationalized the humps to 14 to 4, I think, that we're going to end up with, which is where we are now. We did close one and made a mistake. That's one thing about this model that I hadn't been able to program in, is no mistakes. And we rectified that mistake, the team did. We were in the process of going from 9 dispatching officers to 1, which will be Jacksonville.
When is that planned?
Well, the first ones came in last week.
We'll have 3 offices. We'll have 3 offices moved into Jacksonville by the end of October.
Yeah.
And the rest of the plan.
Yeah, we'll have 4 of our operating units will be in Jacksonville by the end of October. We'll bring the other ones in at the first of the year.
Thank you.
So that'll be done. And, we have some, certainly some other things internally, but everything is being talked about is only to enhance the product further and or create additional efficiencies as we go forward.
So if I could ask,
Sure.
It sounds, when you contrasted sort of, or you gave sort of the background on your experience at CN over the course of a good number of, a little over a year or so, then reducing the size of the locomotives by your fleet by 33%. And I contrast this sort of like with what appears to have happened during this implementation, where not to be completely off base on it, but it seems like it happened overnight. I mean, obviously it wasn't. It was over the course of a few months, but it seems that the implementation of your new operating plan has occurred much more quickly in this situation. And do you agree that it did? And if so, is that what has caused or contributed to some of the service difficulties?
Well, there are different issues. We have had, we've got locomotives stored, 500 are stored. We've got something like 30,000 less freight cars. And I think it's a story there that you should be aware of. Any given day this morning, I think, we had 138,000 cars online.
138, did you say?
138,000 online. And of those 138, round numbers, 70,000 are private cars owned by customers. About 17,000 of them were foreign line cars that had been brought on with goods from another rail. So, we have not, once again, this is not about a lack of assets. We've got people furloughed. Those physical issues were totally different than anything that was faced up.
And I wasn't really asking about the asset, the number, so to speak, but really the timing of the implementation. You were very forthcoming that you think one of the missteps along the way is a lack of a good communication with your employees, so that they knew what they needed to do. And maybe there wasn't enough time to in hindsight, what would you have done differently?
Well, in hindsight, I wouldn't have gone from it's hard to take this out of the context of how it began. This episode began. And you wouldn't start any company with a proxy battle, where one side's saying, this guy's no good, and the other guy's saying, this guy's a superstar. and you get all kind of combinations in between. So, just to be bluntly honest about it, I didn't walk into CSX with a red carpet waiting for me, okay? I was there clearly, I think it was one reason, and that was shareholders. Right or wrong, it was shareholders. And a week before I got there, 1,000 people were taken out. So it wasn't the best place to start from. And, you know, I had, it was me and the team that I inherited. There were some lovely, hardworking, dedicated, two of them sitting here beside me, railroaders that had spent their whole life in this. But at the same time, there were a few that weren't looking for this to be successful, that caused some issues. So, you know, I was just trying to get off to a better start initially. And if I'd gone back and tried to say what, you know, I'm CSX now, okay? We're a team. If we were a team back the first year, this would have been, you know, planned differently. But I don't want to, I'm not necessarily offering that as an excuse for what happened this summer. What happened this summer is maybe I got people overenthused. And they thought they could do more maybe than they could. And we got ahead of ourselves maybe with the closing of the hump yards. And we had a little bit of bad luck. We had people tend to forget, we had a horrific derailment on the side of a mountain. Shame on us, I'm not blaming on anybody else. And we had a case now that's still under investigation in South Carolina, I think sabotage derailment, where a road grader or bulldozer was put up on the track, covered with pine sapling, and our train came around and hit it. Those caused reroutes. And so people were saying, son, my cars got rerouted. Well, they got rerouted because there was no other place to go. So once again, could we have communicated that better? Possibly. We had an incident with some inappropriate behavior by some employees at a very important gateway that we had to let 9 people go overnight. Now, you know, that all those little things along the way kind of set back and took the momentum from us. But I think if you had had me, I'd like to come back in 6 months, 3 months, a year and say, where were we today and where are we in 6 months? I think we'll take our place where we belong.
We'll take you up on your offer.
Absolutely, we'd love to have you back. Mr. Harrison, I'd like to ask a couple of questions about precision railroading. And I have heard precision railroading referred to as kind of a fancy term for cost cuttings and reducing service. I really like the way you described sort of the 5 values of precision railroading. Those all resonated with me. I appreciated that you began with the issue that the driving force is service, yet still what you will hear people saying sort of on the sidelines is that the net result of what happens is that costs are reduced and service is reduced, and it's the shippers who kind of get the short end of the deal. And I'd like to hear you address that.
I disagree. I would invite anybody to go back at any of the places I've been since I became CEO in '92, I believe. Look at the agenda, look at my remarks, and you'll see every time it starts with service, cost control, asset utilization, and so forth. In spite of the fact that we had a case in Canada, for example. It was Canadian National was a Crown Corp. It was spun off from the government. With due respect, that's not a good culture to come from. And so people were viewed differently. Their work habits and the culture was totally different. If someone had a demerge bill, they sent it to Ottawa. They'd send it back to Montreal and say, make the voter and constituent happy. We went through a lot. At Canadian National, we grew revenue. Okay. At Canadian Pacific, we grew revenues. There's nothing wrong with having the best service and the lowest cost. They're compatible. And people that think that this is all about cost, surely you can't be successful in business and not have a good product and not be sensitive to your customer. I don't know how to do that.
I want to ask another question related generally to the concept of precision railroading. Again, one of your values is the issue of asset utilization. You made the point that, you have to recognize something and measure it if you're going to properly utilize it, and I completely agree. And one of the things I have appreciated about the railroad industry is how very metric-driven it is, and I think it provides huge benefits. One of the things I've wondered as I've heard you this morning and sort of talking about the evolution of precision railroading in your own career, I can imagine in those very early days at Illinois Central and then merging with Canadian National that there were huge improvements that needed to be made in the arenas of asset management and measuring and reporting data. What I wonder is if those things that created such huge gains in Canadian National and perhaps even in Canadian Pacific don't apply as strongly today to a more, I'll just use the term modern progressive railroad that is much more steeped in metric-driven decision-making. If you can't get as much benefit now in today's environment that you might have been able to get in an environment 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, it's degrees. I'm not taking sides here. I'm just telling you what we are viewed today. If you read about CSX, okay, as the worst operating railroad in North America. Okay, now that's not a place I want to be. And that has rested with the organization for several years. You can look at it. You can, whatever you trust to reports, analysts, neutrals, to really say what is the opportunities. Certainly, there's not the opportunities as the same at CSX there was at CN. Every railroad is different. It has its own culture, its own challenges, but there's places that we were and are lacking that we're catching up fast on. And so this is not, to my earlier point on cost, this is not about slash and burn. Once again, I cannot understand rational people thinking that you can be successful over a career of 23 or 4 years and not be sensitive to the customer or the top line. Now, do I give it enough? And we talk about internally is this. None of us like to be called the worst. No organization likes that. No individuals that have pride do that. And that's why this organization, I feel extremely confident, is going to bounce back. It's going to bounce back fighting. And you will see us, okay? You know who the gold standard is now in North America? The Canadian railroads. They're way ahead of everybody. They're going to be looking in the rearview mirror as we go by. That's what this company can accomplish. We're going to gain by it. CSX internally. Our customers are going to gain by it. Our employees are going to gain by it. Everybody wins. Everybody wins. You know, I get answered the question all the time. You know, you get three constituencies that you effectively deal with. You got employees, you got customers, and you got owners, shareholders. You know, which one drives you? That's an awful tough decision. Because I can tell you this, right or wrong, in a capitalist society, if you don't please the owner or the shareholder, or they don't get some return, you're probably not going to be there very long. So you got to give the owner something back, or you're going to not be able to attract capital and do the things you need to do. Now, you've got to serve the customer, because you're not going to be able to have returns for the shareholder if you don't get the business from the customer in the appropriate way. Now, all of us that are employees, we need to recognize employee contributions. We need to reinforce. We talk about there's got to be consequences for your actions, both good and bad. You know, if you do something outstanding, you ought to get recognized, hug your neck, give you a plaque for the wall, give you a bonus or some recognition. At the same time, if you don't do your job, people accuse me of this. I don't apologize for this. I have zero tolerance for safety rules. If the person knows exactly what the rule is, okay, and they flagrantly step across and violate the rule, I have no 2 strikes, 3 strikes, you're out. I'm not going to allow that individual to jeopardize another employee's life. Because you don't want to go, you know, the worst experience 2 times in my career, to go to the door of a fatality and explain to the mother and kids their father's not coming home. And the second is lay in a retarded tower with a man with his leg chewed off at the drone area with your hands in blood. You know, I care about those things. I care about this business. I care about this company. This railroad industry we have today is just so much different than when I entered as a kid in the 60s. 60s and 70s, it was embarrassing. It was regulated. Nobody made money. You talk about infrastructure. You talk about service. It was horrible. Staggers came along. Some things happened. And this industry, I think, and I'm a little bit of a historian, has never been on such strong underpinnings. You know, from kind of from top to bottom, I still don't want to be at the bottom. So, you know, we're going to work very diligently and make some things happen here in a very positive way.
So if you come back in 6 months or a year or whatever, and hopefully the railroad is operating the way you want it to operate, what will success look like, or what is the metric that you will have used to say, yes, now we're there, this is where we need to be?
And where are we now?
Yeah, and where are we now? Yeah.
Well, I kind of have to look at it in 3 chances, if you will. One, you know, we got a lot of internal measurements, guidelines that we look at, and they're kind of moving targets. And someday one is very important, and it'll move. So the one thing is the plan. Every car is going to have a plan. I'm not sure we're going to get it all implemented in the 6 months, but we'll be awful close. Every car will have a plan. We hold ourselves out to do the plan 90% of the time.
Does the customer's, I guess, service needs have a role in, as you develop that plan? So they could, you know, like I need it 7 days a week, or I need it at 11 o'clock. How does their service needs come into play?
We put it in a blender.
You what?
We put it in a blender as
Oh.
we blend the mix to try to decide when we run a train. You know, here's the issue we have. Let's say we have a market that there's 100 cars a day coming out of there. And that's, say, 60% of a full train. But, you know, we got to run a train every day. One customer wants to leave at 900. One wants to leave at 2100. One says, Thursday, how about holding the train back? You can't run trains like that. That flies in the face of the plan, which has a domino effect, which affects every other customer. So we think our job is to design service. We listen to the customer, we listen to the market, we gather all the intelligence we can gather, and then we put together the product. And we put it on the shelf, and we hope you buy it. But we cannot have, with due respect, each individual customer designing their own schedule. Now, if there's 7-day service, they got 7-day service. If they need to be serviced, 7 days. You know, if you look at a graph in the rail industry, and a lot of them follow this, it goes like this, okay? It's almost a bell curve. And the left side is Sunday and Monday, and the right side is the opposite. If you could level that playing field out, it's billions of dollars in savings, billions in infrastructure, cars, equipment, and everything. We now, I don't know the past, we operate 365, 724, holidays, whatever, we're there. Now, some of our customers aren't, which is their decision to make. They shut down 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And then we have a blip. Then they come back and want to catch up from. We have a challenge today as we sit here. We've got 2 customers embargo because they're not unloading the cars. This happens to be automobiles. Well, until they unload them, we can't pull them. Until we pull them, we can't get back to get another load. And the people on the other end are saying, where are my empties? So, you know, a lot of the pooling, those type things, I don't think they're going to work in the next generation. But that's a very sensitive subject, I think I can say.
So just to kind of follow up, an interesting discussion, but it doesn't sound like really you would say, this is the metric I'm most concerned about, this is what I'm watching, and when it reaches this point, you know, that's going to be success from your perspective.
No, we have those, certainly.
Can you tell us what some of them are?
Yeah, I'm trying to give the best example here to help. Dwell time, for example, today. In dwell time, you're not trying to get dwell time as low as you can go. You're trying to make your plan.
Make it what, did you say?
Make the plan.
Uh-huh.
The car has a design time to dwell at this yard to make the next train. Don't hurry up and rush to get dwell time down just to sit and wait. It's like my wife approaches the boulevard sign. There's no traffic, you know. It's 50 miles an hour, and she runs up to the bottom of the stop and 50 miles an hour, and then the other cars pull up beside us. She wastes brakes, energy, and so we don't hurry up and wait. If dwell time is here, we're good. If it gets here, we're out of the plane, it's bad. Train speed's another issue. We have a unique concept. Generally speaking, railroads set priorities on meets of trains by the class of train. So And like it or not, the fact remains that railroads give intermodal trains priority. What we do is schedule the meet. And if the local that you think is a slow boat to China is 2 hours late, and the intermodal train is 2 hours early, the local's going to get the railroad. And no, I don't think any of the railroads did it. We did, because we're just trying to make the plan. And that's, the debate we had internally, I should have covered earlier with you. I went back and researched service in the rail industry as a youngster. And no place did I find where to find what was good service. It wasn't in the tariff. It wasn't in contracts. It just made reference to service.
You mean a definition of good service?
Some people want one thing, some people want something else. Some people says if you raise rates, that's bad service. We don't look at it that way. And so we said, well, how do we deal with this animal? Of one wants an empty, clean car. One wants outbound perfection and speed. One wants something else. So here's what we defaulted to. We do what we say we're going to do. So we have either tariffs, contracts, which we're trying to move away from, or deals, where I come from, you shake somebody's hand, you say you want to be switched every midnight shift between 12 and 8, you got it. So what we say, good service, do what you say you're going to do. If you tell them you're going to switch them in, switch them in.
Could I just ask maybe about two questions? And one of them, you mentioned dwell as the example you used of a metric. You have a different measurement of dwell and maybe a different measurement for train speed than what the industry overall reports to AAR. And it seems to me that is something that the industry should be able to have an agreement on as far as how they measure something such as dwell, so that there can be consistent reporting through by the carriers. Is that something that you and AAR can work on or will work on? Ed, I see you in the audience. Luckily, there's no one in front of you, so feel...
Luckily, yeah.
It just seems that is something that maybe you could all have some conversations about to make sure that we're getting the most accurate report.
Conversations are indeed scheduled.
Thank you.
Look, we feel like that we need to measure things that help us serve the customer in the best way. I get a little suspicious sometimes of some number that comes up that everybody agrees on. Let me just tell you the basic difference. I'm not taking sides. I'm just telling you facts. When we measure our train speed, we do it from A to Z, with all time included.
And I'm not suggesting that I disagree with that.
Right. And other railroads, I'm not saying they're wrong, they decide that they want to look at train speed without the intermediate stops and delays. So they, from A to Z, they'll go here and they'll have chunks of traffic taken out, of time taken out for the crew change or work at the terminal or pick up and set out. Well, that doesn't give us a good reflection on, for an example, the things that it carries over to, like the locomotives or whatever. And I would, look, we're not trying to be a maverick just to be a maverick, okay? There's sound, hopefully, reasoning and rationale behind these. And we just didn't want to get into reporting 2 or 3 different numbers. And I can tell you that dwell times starts someplace one time, and it starts another place sometimes. Some cars are dwelled, some cars aren't dwelled. There's just different views there. And it's been our view that if we get to the plan and move a customer's car,
So as it's ping-ponged, and maybe that is being reduced at this point, but in the summertime, as cars were ping-ponging sort of throughout the network to clear yards so that you could kind of right-size things, are all of those ping-pongs included in your dwell and train speed?
if I understand the ping pong, I want to
I
be
know,
sure.
it's a new concept to me, too.
No, but the ping pong of,
Like, there's a car in Nashville, which I will say is not clogged. I saw it last week. But as an example, we certainly heard a lot of concerns about Nashville during the summer. And shippers have heard, or have told us how, they saw their car at one location, and then suddenly it ping-ponged to Kentucky, and then it ping-ponged somewhere else. I mean, shippers will probably explain it more clearly to you.
no, I understand.
And then suddenly it gets back. So is that all, I know it's not part of the plan, at least I don't think it is, but is that counted in your metrics as far
Yes.
as,
And that, in fact, it raises a good point. Part of the ping ponging, I don't like the term, but I'll accept it.
I thought it was your turn,
No,
so I'll try to
no, it's not.
come up with a new one.
It's not. Some of that was reroutes as a result of derailments. Now, not all of it was, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting to you is the 9 people that left us, okay, that had to be dismissed, what they did was they said, we're going to get criticized for delaying cars. They made fictitious movements in the computer. That the car, it was here all the time. They showed it going out to Never Never Land, going 700 miles out and 700 miles back, and it never moved. So that's some of the pushback. Now, and I want to be careful about something. Sometimes when I say pushback, my friends in the labor organizations, I'm not pointing the finger at them at all. Of the reductions that we've made right now, of the first 1,000 that were made, 90+% were management, non-union personnel. Okay, so these were non-management personnel that made these movements, for example. And that's one of the reasons that we put some of these things in, is some check and balance to be sure we don't have games being played.
I'd like to just for a minute go back to the metrics and make 2 points. You don't even necessarily need to respond, but I want to reinforce what Chairman Begeman said. One of the concerns, I think, has been that because this is a network industry, it's part of what makes it so interesting and challenging, right? You have private companies operating on a network that then impacts other private companies in terms of what they do. And so in some ways, while you're all individual, there's also an element where you all have to work together for the entire network to run smoothly. And so I think I at least, and perhaps it's misplaced, but I was concerned when I heard you were doing a different set of metrics that didn't match up with the other railroads, because it does seem like it's important that there's some comparability and the ability not to just look at how is each individual railroad operating, but overall, is it a smooth network? So I appreciate the fact that Mr. Hamburger indicated that there's some discussion going on, and I just want to reinforce, I think it's important. And then finally, for anybody in the audience, I want to say, there are metrics reported to the board. Those are all comparable, and CSX is reporting to us just as we've asked them to. So that information is out there in the method that we've asked for it to be reported.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
My comments are this. You've asked us, and we have furnished metrics, however you want to see it. I just hasten to add that if people don't really know what they're doing, they're going to drive the wrong decisions and the wrong conclusions. But, we're going to measure our way and your way. And so, I mean, I think we're all happy.
Well, I think part of our many challenges and shippers' challenges are we need something to look at rather than just hearing over the phone that things are getting better. And so it gives us something, and whether or not it's a clear picture, but it's just like one of the many things that we can consider besides, hearing from a railroad, hearing from a customer,
Yeah.
hearing from various stakeholders, or hearing from short lines. It just sort of helps inform us and interested stakeholders. I just have one more last thing that I'd like to ask. In August, we had, besides asking you for metrics, we also had asked for basically a plan for the rest of the year that included what you envisioned for the major milestones and action plans, just so that we could kind of know what to expect, and I didn't find your response to be responsive to at least what I was expecting or hoping for. And I guess it's not that we want to hold you to, like, you're going to do exactly what you said on this date, because it is a network. You need to be flexible and fluid. But I think we'd all just sort of appreciate knowing, like, do you plan to, will another hump be closed between now and the end of the year? Or will there be particular corridors that may face more congestion? I'm always worried about Chicago in winter. Stay away from there. Don't screw with Avon Yard until the spring, if at all. But I would certainly appreciate knowing to the extent that you can tell us, sort of, or is it maybe we're just going to continue to restore service before making any more changes?
No, let me answer this one. I tried to give you precision schedule railroad because that's our plan. That's how we do things. So we're going to continue to do that and implement it. There are no plans right now.
Well, then maybe where hasn't it been implemented?
Well, it's implemented everywhere, but there's still some, quote, fine-tuning to do. And some of that's communication with customers, of misunderstanding, of knowing what the cutoff is. There could be some software issues. I don't think there'll be, but I'm told it won't. But I've been fooled there before. But there's...
So the worst is over?
I'd like to say it a different way. Yeah, the worst is over, and the best is right around the corner. And I don't want to be... I'm not trying to be evasive. So let me answer this one. I told you about the personnel changes we're making. The plan is effectively in. There's a few places it's not fully colored in. If you trace it, we got the plan. There's a few spots that are hanging out. But once again, nothing of a major issue. We plan on it.
Then maybe, since you're not going to tell me what I'm hoping you would tell me, maybe I could just...
What do you want me to tell you?
Well,
Help.
specificity such as Selkirk, this is going to happen in November. But if you don't want to do that,
No.
could you just commit to, once you know what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, can you please communicate that to your customers?
I thought it did earlier, but look, we have no plans, okay, to change any more humps in the foreseeable future, if ever, okay? We told you about bringing the dispatching officers in. We told you about hiring personnel, and the rest of it's going to be running to the plan. Now, are there going to be some potential layoffs? Yeah. I mean, we got to run the business, but from the customer standpoint of what they see as service, there's not going to be any changes. If there were, I'd tell you. We've got a couple of things that people are talking to us about that are external. And I don't want to sit here and say we're not going to do anything. If all of a sudden that crops up and some announcement's made, I don't want to be in that position. So, trust me, it's run to the plan, do what we're doing today, as I've told all of you, and I would hasten to add the customers. if you want to come see what we're doing, please come. You know, we've got the finest operating rail yard in Waycross. I'll put them up against anybody. The Midwest problems are settled down. Selkirk appears to be there to stay, all indications for the future. And we have not closed everything. You know, we have one yard that's effectively, I gotta be careful my terms, but it's mothballed. It's a new yard and the switches are spiked. And we have another facility, you know, that could change. So I'm not saying there's not going to be any changes, but they're only going to be positive changes that we're confident in what's going to be done.
I want to go back and ask a couple of questions related to Chicago. As Chairman Begeman indicated, you know, I mean, when things are bad in Chicago, they're bad everywhere. So, you know, one of the things that's always the primary concern is, are things still operating smoothly in Chicago? When you were CEO at CP did not participate in the CTCO process in Chicago, where all the railroads come together to coordinate. And will CSX continue to participate in CTCO?
You know, I don't, as we speak, I don't know the status of that, but my answer would be probably not.
And can you explain to us why that is? I would just honestly say, to me, that feels like, you know, this is the opportunity for the railroads to work together to both address their concerns and ensure that Chicago operates smoothly. And by withdrawing from that process,
we never got in.
Well, in or out, not participating feels like a way to really not agree to cooperate with other railroads.
I think when the concept, I've been talking Chicago my whole career. Nobody's, in my view, nobody's listening. Okay. When the first issue came out about CTO, and there were, and this, if I'm remembering correctly, it's over 15 years ago plus, going back. And if I'm wrong in that, I'll correct it for the record. And there was a budget item put on it that was going to be order of magnitude, something that I said, you know, you can quadruple that. And you're not going to get anything in Chicago.
You're talking about making infrastructure improvements in Chicago.
Yeah, what it boiled down to so far has been, you know, it's way over budgeted. Okay, it was doing things that, in our view, didn't need to be done, that weren't going to be effective. We had tried to influence the other railroads with other plans. You know, it got into...
Excuse me, can I ask a question? Even if you don't agree with the infrastructure plan and the dollars that are being spent, and that they're being spent in a way that's going to get, you know, the best improvement, that still, for me, doesn't address why there isn't value in working through a cooperative organization where the railroads are working together to be sure that Chicago remains fluid and that each railroad's needs are being recognized and addressed.
If I could interrupt, if you don't mind, in 2014, in the middle of the service crisis, Dan and I had traveled to Chicago. We spent a day with CSX staff, touring the Elsden line, touring the CTCO offices. And in my view, having a participant, maybe you participate by phone, but the reason it helps to have a body there is really for the same reason you want to consolidate your dispatchers, at least as it was explained to me, so that you can just go and talk to someone rather than ringing them up. So I hope that you'll at least reconsider.
You know, look, we think that we have a corporate responsibility. We have a responsibility as a taxpaying citizen to not support projects under the quote railroad banner that we don't think are going to be effective, and the dollar is being spent the wrong way. And if we chunk our dollars in there, it's just like we're an advocate of it. And I think that if you go back. Sorry.
And we aren't talking about a monetary aspect. We're just talking about participation and knowing what's happening that day.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. When everything was, those offices sounded nice, okay? But the people that were in there, and I'm not being critical of those people, they weren't allowed to make any decisions. They said where they're going to pass on and coordinate. We got computer systems that talk to each other. That's not what an issue. Okay, there were several projects on there, and what it turned into not adding rail infrastructure. It started getting into grade crossings in this district and that district and so forth. And we think that we have a responsibility. Look, with due respect to the AAR, and we're members of the AAR, you have a responsibility not to just be, a spokesman and say, if they say it's right, we're there. You have a right to say, and you should say, here's what should be done, in our view.
I suspect, Mr. Harrison, that if you all participated, no one would ever accuse you or the organization of simply endorsing what others had indicated.
Have a say.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. Look, we had various numerous operating plan suggestions for Chicago, which were totally rejected, rightfully so, by the other rails. Okay? We said, look, if you really want to go to y'all's ultimate, what we suggested is that you take the Belt assets, the Belt Railroad of Chicago assets, and the IHB assets, and throw them in a big pool and divide up where everybody gets their little piece of the rock they had invested, and create one company called Chicago Rail with a mandate to move rail traffic, all rail traffic, through the Chicago Gateway, okay, in a non-discriminatory way. The mandate is move traffic through the city. Now, when the other railroads say no, I lose this competitive advantage, and I understand they don't want to lose competitive advantage, but let's be sure we understand what we're looking at. We offered to buy the Belt Railroad. Nope, don't want you to have it. I said, we got a reputation, pretty good operators, I'll buy it. Nope. Well, IHB, not for sale. Canadian Pacific's in a position today where they own 49% of the IHB and have virtually no control. So there's other ways to get here. And I think there's a possibility, there's new leadership at the AAR. There's some leadership, I understand, it's going to stay a while and help us. I think people are looking at things differently. And I'm hopeful. Look, if we could be one big happy family, I'm all for it. I love to be with y'all here, but this is not my favorite way to spend the day. I'd much rather be railroading and fixing the problem. But I don't want us to be looked as, we're not an outlier just to be an outlier. I think it's fair to say, I hope it's fair to say, that this team that I have been associated with have had a hell of an impact on the rail network in the U.S. And this is not my quotes, this is other quotes. It was the gold standard. okay? And so we got something to offer. And that's why I'm glad to be able to have this dialogue today. I'm learning, you're learning, I think, hopefully. I'm not, normally, I hadn't had a lot of experience with listening sessions. And I'm probably not very good at it.
You're doing
But
fine.
we all want to get, I think, to the same place.
Yeah, I'm sure we
And
do.
that satisfies the customer.
Can I switch gears a little bit? I want to ask about Amtrak. You know, sort of in the midst of all of this, in some ways, in terms of letters to us, we probably heard more from shippers who've had concerns, but I'm wondering how Amtrak has been affected by the changes at CSX and what sort of dialogue the railroad is maintaining with Amtrak, VRE, MARC.
Okay.
Well, Amtrak is here today.
Your microphone might not be on.
Amtrak is here today. Chris Jagodinski is here. He'll talk to the board later today. But we have a very open dialogue with MARC and VRE and Amtrak, and we discuss issues and problems, and we handle them directly.
Yes, I'm sorry. Could you identify yourself for the
Bob
reporter?
Furla.
Thank you. And could you just say a little bit more, as you're looking at metrics and seeing improvements made and how things are operating at a Precision Railroad, are you seeing improvements in on-time performance for Amtrak as well?
We have contracts with Amtrak and contract standards that we strive to meet, and we've made some real improvements, and I don't want to take words from Chris, but we've made some significant improvements in the auto train from Virginia down to Orlando, and our on-time performance with that. We're working with them on some of their silver service to improve the on-time performance of that operation.
And then, Mr. Harrison, related to Amtrak, I wanted to ask you a question. And this maybe was my perception, perhaps inaccurate, but it seemed when you were the head of Canadian Pacific, that railroad really took a different approach to how it dealt with Amtrak. And as a consequence, really the on-time performance at CP for Amtrak was really very good. And I'm wondering if you have personally a philosophy that you implemented at CP that you would intend to implement at CSX in relationship to Amtrak trains?
I think it's maybe fair to say, and Amtrak, we need to live up to the contracts. We have contracts, as Bob mentioned. We need to do what we say we're going to do. Now, do freight railroaders love Amtrak? No, probably not. And it's, you know, and the groups to some degree clash because it's almost designed that way. You know, you're not, in my view, you're not going to solve the problem with Amtrak and some private partnership, public-private partnership, unless there's something in it for somebody. And if, in spite of the fact that some, maybe some carriers, I just said to people at CP, we're doing what we say we're going to do. And we didn't have much of an issue there at CN. And we did also adhere to that at Illinois Central. I think, if I could say this country is begging for a transportation policy. I've said all I can say about Chicago. I'm telling you, in this day and age that we live in, it's just, I don't even want to think about it, but we better address those issues. We're trying to do too much. There's not the infrastructure in certain parts that would deal with this. You can't have in Chicago commuters trying to grow to take up infrastructure and eminent domain against CP when 4 years ago people were arguing that they didn't have enough infrastructure and wanted to shoot them. People say, don't haul that hot stuff by my front door. Well, we got a common carrier obligation. So, you know, we've got a common carrier, we've got a lack of, potential lack of infrastructure, we've got the Chicago and other, and it's just the concentration in Chicago. But, you know, if you're gonna do commuter rail, they wanna grow, obviously by the actions I just described. Metro wants to grow. Every railroad today wants to go to Chicago. Now, if the railroads, and another proposal of ours going back, wanted to cooperate and work together, you wouldn't pick one gateway like Chicago to run everything through. Why not Memphis, Tennessee? Why not New Orleans? Why not Jackson? Why not St. Louis? Why not some of these country gateways? It's about money. Now, I'm happy, you know, to say, look, we ought to do something maybe at the Mississippi River. But to try to pile everything into Chicago, we're just asking for trouble with all that concentration there. You know, I'll offer this to you. We tried to make the case. We created, sponsored, or if it was wrongdoing, what was called in this industry, let's see, I go back in time, but about 2004, a routing protocol that we sponsored, this was Canadian National. And what it basically said, oversimplified, is that we're running cars out of routes all over this country, every day, because of a mentality of long haul, get the big division of money. And our concept was this: let's look at every car and say, if there was one railroad, and it was just for efficiencies, how would it be routed? And that was the routing protocol. Now, there were values given if you had to go through a terminal, a congested terminal, but it basically was driven off the route, okay? And we sold that. You think it wasn't a hard sell to sell the 4 big boys in town here, okay? And we adopted it, and we said we'd split the revenues, nobody would be, you know, left out. And it worked for us like a charm. Why would a car go from Chicago that's going to Vancouver and be routed through New Mexico? And every time you do that, you take up infrastructure, you require more cars, and so forth. And so finally, we headed up to 95% of the cars were going on the design, this protocol route. And I retired. And I came back, lured back. And I said, what about routing protocol? You know what people said? What? Just blew up. So we got a lot of ideas.
Don't retire.
Huh?
Don't retire.
One more time. My wife's done with retirement parties.
All right, well, do you have anything else? Thank you. This actually has gone probably a little longer than we had planned, and it was a very useful conversation, I think. We're also very anxious to hear from the shippers and other stakeholders. I know you're interested in hearing what they have to say. I know you're going to be sitting behind them. Please don't throw anything if you disagree. Our first panel of, just again, it's for organizational purposes. We'll hear from Cargill, the Chemours Company, Columns Lumber Products, Crystal, and Dow Chemical Company. ahead.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Commissioners Begeman and Miller. My name is Brad Hildebrand. Get up a little closer. I'm the Vice President and Global Rail and Barge Lead for Cargill Incorporated. Thanks for making me the lead off.
We've heard from you before, so we know what to expect. In a good way.
In a good way. So Cargill provides food, agriculture, financial, industrial products, and service to the world. We have a total of 20 processing facilities and elevators located on the CSX Railroad. Cargill sells grains and grain products to a number of customers in the eastern United States. We also provide markets to our producer customers to sell their grain and oil seeds. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today on behalf of Cargill and the many customers that we serve. In my remarks, I would like to describe some of the issues that we have seen with the CSX's service and the impact that it's had on Cargill and our customers. I would also like to reach out to the STB as well as to the CSX to make sure everyone is doing their part to restore the reliability of service that is necessary to handle not only the harvest upon us, but our business operations going forward. Since the beginning of June, we have experienced a number of service disruptions at our CSX served locations. These disruptions have resulted in Cargill plant closures, plant slowdowns, as well as numerous operational challenges for our customers. CSX service issues have also impacted our producer customers as they market their grains and oilseeds to Cargill. As you can see, failures by the railroad have implications for our producer as well as our downstream customers. Over the summer and continuing into this fall, we have been forced to move hundreds of trucks monthly to CSX destinations in order to keep our customers' production lines operating. These are additional costs that Cargill and our customers have borne while the CSX, under the leadership of E. Hunter Harrison, implements what he has dubbed as precision scheduled railroading, and we've heard lots about that today. As mentioned earlier, our troubles with the CSX started back in June as tank cars loaded with corn sweetener from our plant in Dayton, Ohio were parked for up to 2 weeks. Our cars were parked to keep traffic away from the Cincinnati yard while the CSX changed their operating plan and rolled out a new operating system. These changes were all part of the CSX's effort to implement PSR. The inability to get loaded cars moving during this period resulted in our customers running out of sweetener and having to shut down production lines. The delays forced us to ship trucks long distances and divert production from our plants in the west in order to avoid running more customers out of our products. In early August, the temporary closure of the CSX Avon yard in Indiana resulted in cars getting backed up heading into our soybean plant in Sidney, Ohio. These delays forced us to shut the plant down on August 13th when we ran out of empty cars to load soybean meal. Customers that would normally receive meal from this plant via rail had to truck meal into their mills in order to feed their chickens and turkeys. After seeing their system almost seize up, the CSX decided to reopen Avon as a hump yard to alleviate the congestion in their network. To your earlier point, we're also seeing cars ping-pong, my words, ping-pong, around the CSX's network as they move trains out to make room for cars in congested yards. Empty cars are being routed in many different ways as they head back to our plants. It becomes very difficult to plan production and fulfill our obligations when we cannot rely on consistent transit times. These are just a few examples of the issues that we have faced since June. The CSX announced in the Wall Street Journal this week that transitional issues are resolved. Transitional issues are resolved. They would have you believe that things are actually better than in 2016. Let me assure you that our service and that of our customers is certainly not better than what it was prior to the current management taking over. While we would agree that we have seen an improvement in their transit time since August, we are only back to average relative to the past 9 months. Back to average. I would caution people that 1 month does not a trend make. What has not improved, and has actually gotten worse at some locations, is local switch service. The first mile and last mile service is probably more important to us than how fast our cars run between points A and B. If crews do not show up, or do not bring us the cars that we need to run our plants consistently, we have to slow or shut down plants, turn away farmers, and truck products to our customers. So you ask, why is this happening? In many cases, we have seen local crews reduced and jobs eliminated. The crews that remain are being asked to switch more customers on a given shift, and in some cases, we are being told that the days a week that we're actually being serviced is being cut back. This means that any hiccup in the CSX results in us having to either slow our processing rate or shut the plant down altogether. Cargill shut the Sydney, Ohio soybean plant down on September 30th and again on October 1st due to lack of cars. The CSX blamed this on a locomotive failure. This past Monday, the Lafayette, Indiana soybean plant was down in the morning because the local crew could not pull our loads because they ran out of hours. The local crews that serve us are doing the best jobs that they can. As Mr. Harrison pointed out, these are good people. They're hardworking people. We have very good relations with these people. But they're being asked to do more work than they're capable of doing with the resources that they're being given. Mr. Harrison has publicly stated that we, the shippers, need to bear some pain and suffering for the changes that are being rolled out. I would like to ask you, where in business today would a company put their customers through this type of pain in order to implement a supposed new and improved operating model? As a shipper, precision scheduled railroading means having to accept less service and adjusting our operations to accommodate how the CSX has structured the railroad. In a nutshell, PSR means having to do less with less. This is why we need a strong governing body to ensure that the CSX is doing everything in their power to restore service and reliability to their network. Cargill applauds the actions taken by the STB to hold the CSX accountable and require them to report on their progress. We would request that the STB ask the CSX for a detailed plan on their changes and how they are going to keep our service from deteriorating both short-term and long-term. We would also ask that you keep the weekly calls in place until the railroad has demonstrated consistent and sustainable service levels for a significant period of time. We also request to make the minutes of these conversations public for all stakeholders to view. For the CSX, I would ask that you restore our local service to the level that enables us to run our plants at the desired rate. We ask that you add some resources back to your network to enable some resiliency. We also ask that before you reduce switching at any of our plants, that you first reach out, communicate the plan changes with us. In some cases, we may be able to accommodate fewer switches. Finally, please restore the faith and trust that you can provide a level of service that is worthy of shippers providing you business. Cargill is counting on you. Our customers are counting on you. I thank you for the time and the opportunity to speak on behalf of Cargill and our customers. This concludes my comments.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Kevin?
Good morning, Chairman Begeman and Vice Chairman Miller. My name is Kevin Acker, and I'm the Strategic Relationship and Category Manager for Rail at the Chemours Company in Wilmington, Delaware. In my role, I am responsible for a $115 million annual enterprise that provides rail transportation services to my internal clients and our external customers. I'm a 15-year rail customer representing 2 Fortune 500 companies and a 15-year veteran of 2 Class 1 rail carriers, having held positions in marketing, sales, and transportation. I'm grateful to the board for holding this listening session, and I appreciate the opportunity to share our experience over the last 5 months and offer suggestions to mitigate the impact of future sweeping network interruptions. Chemours is a $5.4 billion commodity chemical company that owes its success to its unwavering commitment to its customers. For us to provide best-in-class service to our customers, we demand best-in-class service from each business partner along our lengthy supply chains. When a link in one of those supply chains is broken, we take extraordinary measures to protect our customers. Chemours is dependent on a North American rail network to satisfy the needs of its customers. We rely on CSX and 53 other rail carriers for the safe and efficient delivery of inbound raw materials and outbound finished goods. A full 96% of our rail business is captive. We are local to...
Excuse me, what was the percentage again?
96. We are local to CSX at our single largest rail served site at New Johnsonville, Tennessee. On an annual basis, this site receives 4,000 cars of inbound raw materials and ships 1,600 cars of outbound finished product. The events over the last 5 months have cost Chemours dearly. We are a 7-day-a-week customer at New Johnsonville, and CSX has failed to provide scheduled service 53% of the time between May 1st and August 31st. We altered production schedules to compensate for lack of delivery. We reduced run rates and changed formulations to keep our plant running. We've had to ship and receive 4 trucks for each rail car that was hopelessly delayed, and we have asked our customers to do the same. To date, we have spent in excess of $1.3 million in trucking to assure delivery of critical raw materials for production and to supply finished product at a time of peak cycle demand. And we will continue to supplement rail shipments with truck until we regain our confidence that CSX can deliver the service our customers demand. In August, we experienced transit time increases of between 57 and 187% in 6 key customer lanes versus full year 2016. These increases not only stress a fleet of rail cars, they also add a substantial working capital burden. September showed improvement over August, but we're still not back to full year 2016 transit times, or better, as we're told it will be as a result of precision scheduled railroading, and I'm hopeful October will show further improvements in transit time as well. Communication between CSX and Chemours has improved greatly since June, but it's largely due to the full engagement of our CSX account team and their senior management. It's still not clear to me what, if any, proactive role the customer service group has in resolving customers' issues, and that concerns me. I believe the customer service team plays a vital role in ensuring the operating plan is being executed and service issues are resolved promptly. Since September 1st, there has been only one occasion when CSX failed to service our New Johnsonville site, and they did the right thing. They called our plant representative, explained the challenge, and asked our permission to skip a service day. That's what partners do. CSX is a partner of Chemours, a strategic partner. We simply will not succeed without them operating at their level best. The last 5 months have been a very costly disappointment to us, and I hope we have turned a corner. CSX knows there's still much work to do to deliver the caliber of service we're paying for, and I firmly believe they are committed to getting this right. We at Chemours fully support a consistent, reliable, and cost-effective railroad, which we're told is what precision scheduled railroading will deliver. We expect CSX will want to share the benefits of PSR in terms of lower costs to its customers, so its customers can remain competitive in the markets they serve, grow their businesses, and therefore grow CSX. If the implementation of this unilateral action by CSX has taught us one thing, it's that the board clearly has a role in protecting the business interests of rail shippers. To mitigate similar network meltdowns in the future, I believe the board should more closely monitor the performance measures from all the carriers to proactively identify possible network disruptions and respond to them immediately. I believe the board should require the rail carriers to file a flight plan, so to speak. If a carrier intends to implement a significant change to its operating plan, I believe that flight plan must include, in detail, how it intends to notify its customers of the impending change, how the change may impact the customer, what the benefit of the change is to the customer, and what the management of change process will be. For example, how it intends to resolve implementation issues, who the appropriate customer contacts will be, and what the escalation process will be. On behalf of the Chemours Company, I would like to again thank you for this opportunity to share our experience to date with CSX's implementation of precision scheduled railroading, and to reiterate, Chemours fully supports a more efficient, higher velocity, and less costly rail network. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chairman, for taking time to hear my experience with CSX
Oh,
Railroad.
microphone.
I'm Bill Scott, Vice President of Column Lumber Products in Allenville, South Carolina. We're a family-owned sawmill, third generation, with the fourth generation waiting to take over. We manufacture southern yellow pine dimensional lumber and make utility poles. We currently employ roughly 250 local residents and in the process of expanding our production and adding to our workforce. Indirectly, Columns impacts another 100 to 150 employers and their employees within the logging industry. At our current production rate, we make about 190 million board feet of lumber annually, meaning that we are larger than average southern yellow pine sawmill. I've been handling CSXC at our facility for 35 years. I have seen the service go from a CSXC agent at your door to having to call someone in Jacksonville, Florida, who is looking at a computer screen that knows nothing about your local facility or your local rail line. I have had my service cut from daily service to 3 times a week by a prior trainmaster. The reason for this cut was our volume did not warrant daily switches. Our volume was down because of CSXC's inability to provide cars. At our facility, we use chip hoppers and center beam flat cars. We place an order for our flat cars, and we always order at least twice what we need to get anywhere close to what we actually need to fill our customers' orders. CSX's order systems resets at midnight on Sundays. For example, if we order 2 cars in a week, we do not get these 2 cars by Sunday midnight, the order goes to 0, even if it's CSX's fault the car did not arrive. So you have to order multiple weeks to get the cars you need. We have had our cars get to our service yard in Augusta, Georgia, and vanished over the weekend. I have called my agent who cannot find these cars. This has happened numerous times. This has caused us unnecessary expense of having to move and store lumber because the cars not arriving, as well as affecting our production schedules because we have to alter them due to deliveries. There have been times we've had to put these orders on trucks to get the product to the customer, or a customer is going to cancel the order. This puts more trucks on an already crowded highway and increase our costs that we did not plan for when making the deal with the customer. I have ordered cars that have sometimes taken 2 weeks to arrive. It's gotten to the point where I always call a few days after I order the car to get the cars moving toward me. If I don't, the order never seems to be filled. I've had CSXD customer service reps call me and want to do more business. I then inform them of the current situation and procedure problems, and you never hear from them again. On the chip hopper situation, we always have a standing order, which means a preset number of cars are delivered every switch. When CSXD changed my switch to 3 days a week, I was always short cars on Mondays and Wednesdays, but on Fridays, I would get loaded up with cars so they could charge me demurrage over the weekend. This situation got so bad, my customers elected to lease their own cars so they did not directly use CSXD cars, and my customers could control the car flow. The whole fleet of chip hoppers we use today is owned or leased by my customers. This has been a very brief history of what CSXD service has been since the mobile agent concept was phased out. More recently, service provided by CSXD has continued to be subpar. On or about June 8th, I called to talk to my train master about a missing flat car. He informed me he'd been transferred to Nashville, Tennessee, and I needed to talk to the yard master in Augusta for further issues. But he would find out about the car and call me back, of which he did. On June 12th, I called the yard master in Augusta to find out where the train was. He told me he had been fired. I then called my old train master, and he finally found out a day later who I needed to talk to. On Wednesday, June 14th, I finally got in touch with the two new train masters, Alan and Charlie. Alan informed me he'd been on vacation the previous week, came to work on Monday, and this was put on him. He knows nothing about the customers, their needs, and will do the best he can. Needless to say, the service was horrible for approximately 2 weeks due to their internal personnel transfer. In late June, CSXT changed my service dates without informing me of the change, which caused me a lot of confusion of routing trucks to avoid the CSXT's inability to provide service. This also caused cancellation of flat car orders I had in place for 2 weeks. I have this on CSX email, which I will submit for the record, who took it upon himself to cancel the car orders because my switch dates had been changed without telling me anything. My customers were expecting these orders to ship, and the cars disappeared because of problems with both customers and myself. My customers have been told expected arrival dates of these cars. Having to go back and tell them of the change to Bullet Miley, they were not happy. 2 weeks later, they changed the service again without my knowledge, back to the original service schedule, and we had to go through the same issue again, which left us without cars. This is merely one specific incident, of which there are many, but we don't have the time because it would take me days to discuss. CSXT seems to have a total disregard for customer service and business relations. They seem to do what they want, when they want, regardless of impact on your business. When you try to call someone, you will get their voicemail, and it's a rarity to receive a call back. The lack of response to this organization within CSXT is having an ongoing negative implications for our family-owned business. And I do hope the board and CSXT will take appropriate actions to correct this problem. I will also be submitting a statement for the record. Thank you for your time, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Chairman Begeman and Vice Chair Miller, my name is Greg Joswack, and I am the Corporate Vice President of Integrated Supply Chain at Dow DuPont Material Science. Thank you for holding this listening session today to discuss CSX rail issues. Many shippers, including Dow, have experienced significant impact to their supply chain as a result of CSX implementing its new precision rail operating model. Dow makes significant use of rail transportation and is a captive shipper with over 12,000 annual rail shipments covering 23 states and over 300 locations on this railroad. The CSX precision rail operating model has negatively impacted captive shippers with the closing of yards, laying off of people, and idling locomotives. CSX implemented these measures without considering their impact to captive customers, without providing adequate notice, and without establishing a clearly defined process for addressing service issues. We've been very surprised that improvements were not made based on similar problems experienced during the implementation of precision railroading at Canadian Pacific. The size and complexity of the CSX network suggests the potential for even greater problems. As a CSX customer, captive customer, Dow has taken on the burden of obtaining adequate service and has experienced increased transit and dwell times and increased transportation costs with the new model. An example of Dow's service problems from the implementation occurred at Dow's Carrollton, Kentucky plant, which produces materials used in electronics, personal care, and the construction industry. Without any notice, the CSX Cincinnati terminal ground to a halt with railcar congestion that prevented cars from flowing into the Carrollton plant, which is a captive facility. For several weeks, Dow pursued daily communication with CSX to provide specific car information and required delivery dates to avoid shutting the plant down. It was Dow's perseverance with CSX that enabled Carrollton to operate at reduced rates until the improvement in the congestion at the Cincinnati yard. Unfortunately, service issues spread across other Dow facilities. Dow customers have also been impacted due to the high variability in service. In August, Dow's calculation of CSX performance indicated average dwell times at major switching locations ranging from 53 to 312 hours compared to baseline for railroad dwell of 24 to 30 hours at interchange. That service variability forced Dow to use alternate transportation modes at much higher costs. And this is to ship products to our captive customers in the Southeast and Midwest. As a captive shipper, Dow needs continued STB oversight of the CSX railroad operating model. I would like to ask the STB to consider the following. First, around communication and transparency. Dow needs timely and continued flow of information from CSX on operational changes that are likely to impact service. We have been burdened with providing significant railcar dwell information to CSX, and they have not taken a proactive approach to address service issues. We also need transparency. For instance, what CSX intentions are for the number and location of hump yards. I think even today we heard that there may be no more changes, and we also heard that there may also be changes. The second is around meaningful service metrics and visibility. Dow supports the STB's efforts to continue to collect and report specific service metrics for CSX. However, CSX has created new service metrics for dwell and train speed that appear to lower dwell time and increase train speed, but are inconsistent with historical and industry standard metrics. Dow would like the STB to expand the collection of industry standard railcar dwell methodology for CSX as reported in EP 724 to include Chicago, Illinois, Montgomery, Alabama, and Russell, Kentucky. Effective metrics are imperative to allow Dow supply chain to manage service variability. Third, around emergency service relief. Although the STB has established rules for obtaining expedited relief from service emergencies and temporary relief for railroad service inadequacies, the reality is the expedited procedures take too long. We need a service remedy counted in days, not weeks or months. Dow asks the board to consider a timely rulemaking to develop a more realistic expedited process to obtain alternate emergency service based on core rail service. In summary, Dow remains very concerned with the effectiveness and the resiliency of the CSX precision rail service model and its ability to meet the service needs of our captive plants and our customer locations. We are committed to work with both CSX and to STB to arrive at a workable solution. Thank you for allowing us to speak at the CSX Transportation Rail Service Issue Public Listening Session.
Chairman Begeman and Vice Chair Miller, my name is Lisa Powers. I am with Crystal. And the reason I wish to speak is that CSX's current service delays and changes are significantly impacting Crystal's continued ability to do business. The viability of Crystal's business is dependent upon the production of titanium dioxide, also known as TiO2, which is used in paints, plastics, and pigment and paper, and titanium tetrachloride, which is a feedstock that goes into making titanium sponge metal. Our ability to ship our products by rail, along with local rail switches to place raw materials at our manufacturing sites, is critical.
Oh, no. Don't feel bad. It happens to us, too. It's not personal.
I apologize for that. Uninterrupted rail transportation and local rail service is critical to our continued delivery of our many products for various uses. I would like to highlight several areas in which CSX's communication and practices have directly impacted Crystal's ability to do business. After nearly 20 years, CSX at the end of September gave Crystal 30-day notice on the cancellation of leased track space with the threat of embargoing our cars if not removed within those 30 days. This places additional financial burden on not only Crystal, but other local businesses to source and repair sufficient track space to store our cars. CSX provided a one-week notice of rate increases and repeatedly demonstrated an unwillingness to negotiate until Crystal escalated the issue higher in the CSX organization. Changes in the work practices at the local yard have resulted in wrong and/or missed services to the Crystal plants, lost plant production, and TIH cars not properly secured. While CSX may cite improving dwell times as a metric, Crystal is frequently now raising inquiries on inbound chlorine as the cars make numerous moves between yards, past the local yard, and back again, to your ping pong term earlier. Increasing and inconsistent transit times have forced Crystal to increase targeted raw material inventories by nearly 50%. Year-to-date transit times to our primary customers are up 18 to 39% over 2016, and Q3 has been the most severe at 24 to 70% increase over 2016 times. The increasing transit times have placed customers at risk and caused Crystal to service them with tank trucks. The on-time delivery rate to our customers is 71% year-to-date versus 2016 at 79%. And that's using historical transit times. But if you look at CSX's reported transit times based on what they say they should do, on-time deliveries are anywhere from 44 to 63% this year to our customers. Due to the increase in transit times on inbound and outbound material and the need to service customers with tank trucks versus rail cars, the cost impact to Crystal is approximately $700,000 year-to-date. When Crystal raises service issues with our account representative, we are repeatedly reminded that the tariff language allows CSX to not guarantee service and cannot be subject to financial compensation to customers who are forced to use their service. Lastly, we are concerned about the potential closure of the CSX Ashtabula, Ohio yard. The Ashtabula switch yard needs to remain open to support local manufacturing. Crystal urges you to help resolve the service issues many customers are experiencing with CSX. By doing this, you will play a critical role in alleviating commercial burdens throughout the TiO2 industry and the U.S. economy. Resolving the current state of rail transportation on the CSX network will bring comfort that Crystal will not have to face shutting its doors to its customers, and it will allow the industry to continue providing the needed material for consumer goods to the public. Thank you for your time and attention.
Mr. Johnston, did you want to chime in, please?
I would love to chime in. I was a little late getting the microphone moved. I thank Mr. Scott for moving along and filling the gap. But good morning, Acting Chairman Begeman, Vice Chair Miller. I'm Eddie Johnston, Federal Government Affairs Manager for the Comores Company. Thank you again for holding this listening session. I want to say at the outset here that I appreciate Mr. Harrison attending this session today in person. His presence and his remarks are a sign that he realizes the severity of the problems his customers have experienced and accepts accountability for them. I was heartened to hear Mr. Harrison say, if you don't have service, you have nothing. But let's be clear, merely resolving this year's CSX service problems will provide cold comfort to many rail customers. The root problems that have led us to this point run deeper and broader than Mr. Harrison or CSX. I'm here today because what rail customers like Comores have suffered since spring is unacceptable. It must come to an end. Mr. Harrison has rightly acknowledged this. But getting CSX back on track isn't enough. We must have policy change so it never happens again. The subject of today's session is not an isolated incident. It's already been mentioned, as a matter of fact. In 2013-14, rail customers suffered extensive failures in the upper Midwest. Farmers paid the highest price. The cause? Railroads operating in the region had reduced capacity, eliminated train crews, and idled locomotives. The result? They were unable to respond to a record harvest and cold winter weather, both predictable events for this region of the country. The immediate cause of 2017's failure on CSX is, to me, strikingly similar. System capacity has been reduced. There have been deep personnel cuts, yards have been closed, train crews eliminated, and locomotives taken out of service. Once again, rail customers are paying the price. Now, don't get me wrong, efficiency improvements and better asset utilization are laudable goals. None of us want wasteful or inefficient railroads. But how do rail customers fit into this picture? An efficient rail system that fails rail customers when they need it most is, well, simply a failure. The experiences of 2013-14 and now 2017 are more than failures of particular railroads. They reveal an underlying failure in the federal policy that governs the freight rail industry. Failure to address that underlying cause will predictably produce another system-wide failure. Writing about the Second World War, Winston Churchill described it as the unnecessary war. The clouds of war had gathered for many years while the Western democracies did nothing. Instead of enforcing the 1918 armistice and holding Germany to its terms, they sought to appease until a rearmed Germany thrust the world into a conflict never before imagined. In the same way, this year's service failure was unnecessary. The storm clouds had been gathering for some time. Railroad consolidation, growing monopoly power exercised by the railroads, reduced rail system capacity and declining resiliency, and finally statements by this board that the status quo just doesn't work for rail customers. Even after that warning shot in 2013-14, the United States government remained focused on maintaining outdated policies that protect financially healthy railroads from market forces and common sense regulation. For nearly 40 years, freight rail policy has been governed by the Staggers Act of 1980. A stated goal of that legislation, memorialized in the statute itself, was to provide a regulatory process that balances the needs of carriers, shippers, and the public. Do we have a regulatory process that achieves that balance? Or one that for nearly 40 years has subordinated the needs of rail customers to those of the freight railroads? I met recently with a congressional staffer who asked how much of my business I had shifted to the NS as a result of CSX service failures. At the time, I thought the question insensitive, if not impertinent. Didn't he know that I can't? That I simply don't have that choice? Like the majority of American farmers, miners, and manufacturers, I'm a captive rail customer. You heard Mr. Acker say earlier that 96% of Chemours loaded shipments are captive. I can't give my business to another railroad. Upon reflection, I realize, though, that this staffer's question gets to the heart of the problem. He has choices for all his transactions. His choices about what to buy and who to buy them from. If he becomes dissatisfied, he just takes his business elsewhere. We call that competitive free markets. He was right on reflection to think that a rail customer receiving poor service should be able to buy service from another railroad. That's the way it is in the real world, but not in the rail world. The Staggers Act anticipated this dilemma and explicitly allowed for reciprocal switching where structural competition was absent. Reciprocal switching is no panacea. I concede that. Yet in nearly 40 years, federal regulators have never approved a reciprocal switch. Not one. Lacking competitive market forces to balance the needs of railroads and their customers, we must rely on that regulatory process that those who wrote and passed Staggers recognized would be needed. As you consider the testimony you hear today, I have 5 questions for the board to deliberate and act on. Doing so will help you make reforms that will give us, in Vice Chairman Miller's words, a great transportation system that serves rail customers so we don't repeat recent experience. That may not be a direct quote, but I think it's close. First, how will the board reform its policies, practices, and procedures to balance the needs of railroads, rail customers, and the public as stipulated in the Staggers Act? Secondly, how will the board oversee the service railroads deliver to their customers in a way that provides meaningful early warning when service failures are beginning to develop? May I suggest you appoint a panel of rail customers to advise the board on metrics that may give that insight. Build on the suggestion made by Secretary Perdue by expanding and including other sectors of the economy. Third, how will the board proactively and preemptively intervene before rail customers are harmed by poor service from their rail suppliers? I believe Congress gave you the authority to do that in 2015. Fourth, how will the board hold railroads accountable for service failures, including making restitution to rail customers who incur damages? And fifth, how will the board unleash the power of competitive market forces by fostering greater rail-to-rail competition through reciprocal switching and other pro-competitive policies? Rail customers like Chemours are anxious for your actions, for your answers, and for your actions. In conclusion, rail customers need a rail system that works for them. Federal policies that consistently put railroads first don't work for rail customers. Policies that are out of date and out of touch with today's realities are holding back American farmers, American miners, and American manufacturers. I encourage the STB to use what you hear today to make common sense changes to prevent future rail service failures. The time has come for action. Action that looks to the future rather than being mired in the past. Thank you again for holding this session, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you all for your candid views, giving us an overview of what your experience has been over the last few months. I also think both of us appreciate that you also offered ideas, suggestions, some of them more reasonable than others, but really all of them really thoughtful and much appreciated. If I could start with you, Brad. Your company is quite large. Are you also served by CN and CP?
Absolutely.
So could you, and I don't mean to be a comparative, you to compare it in terms of service, but they have precision scheduled railroading, which has, the kinks have been worked out, I guess is one way to reference it. Are you experiencing similar angst with those carriers? Did you go through the same type of challenges during the implementation? Could you just kind of comment on what your experience was?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, we've experienced similar sort of pains with both the CNCP as they were rolling out and implementing PSR. I would say today that things have stabilized on those two railroads. From my perspective, we still see isolated instances of poor service, so it's no panacea, but clearly more stable than currently what we're experiencing with the CSX. And I'll go back and hearken to my point about the local service is really where we're feeling it. It's that first mile, last mile. And again, for us, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. I liken it to in a football game. You can move the ball between the 20s, all well and good, but when you get to the red zone, boy, you better punch it in. And that first mile, last mile is really the red zone for us. You got to be able to perform. And if you can't perform, then call us. Let us know. Under the former management at CSX, that was something that they really stressed. We don't see it today.
Brad, I want to follow up on that. So you've said that your service is stable on CP and CN and not what you're experiencing here today, but do you have enough historic experience to say whether or not the service you get now on CN is better as a consequence of precision railroading? I mean, is the sense that once you get through the transitional process and things stabilize, that in fact the service is better, is more dependable?
Yeah, so it's comparing a little apples to oranges, Commissioner Miller, because the CN clearly is under new management. Since Mr. Harrison is retired, they've taken a little different approach, although they're still, I'm sure, operating in similar sort of fashion. But they have tried to be a little more accommodating, let's say, working with us on a couple different things, certainly a lot more aggressive than what they have been in the past with new management. So it's a little hard to compare apples to apples to say what Mr. Harrison left is where we're at today. I think it has morphed into something under the new management there at the CN. And clearly, like I said, they're much more aggressive on coming to us, looking for our business, trying to do what they can to price themselves competitively, which is music to my ears. It's nice to see for a change, and doing what they can to handle our business. CP is still kind of, working their way through this. And I would say they're still in kind of a transition phase right now of stabilizing things, but again, coming back to us as customers and saying, hey, what do we need to do to get more of your business? So again, a lot more seemingly accommodating than what they have been.
Mr. Ecker, if I could ask you a question. You had made a recommendation of, I think you said, filing a flight plan as the example for if there were going to be major operational changes by a carrier. I'm curious to know Chemours is such a large multi-billion-dollar company. What do you do at Chemours when you're going to make a change in your operations, or having just been to New Johnsonville to see your facility there? I mean, clearly, when you shut it down, well, you try not to shut it down, of course, but when you have to make some type of operational change or add new capacity, is it that you just have enough other facilities that you can make up for it on the other end? Or could you just kind of give us a sense of what you do to be proactive that you're wanting the railroads to do?
Chairman Begeman, you're giving me the opportunity to speak way out of turn, and I love this. I believe what we do at Chemours is we have a formal management of change process. Whenever we're going to do something that's vastly different than what we've done before, whatever it might be, include the way we move rail cars, we have a formal management of change process that we follow and review, and we get all the constituents on board, and everybody understands what it is we're trying to accomplish and why, what the risks are, what the impacts are, and the timeline in which we expect this to be completed, and we measure the results. Is that fair, Mr. Johnston?
So, I mean, you go out to your customers and, or you post it, or you file it?
This is more in-house than it is for our customers outside. I can't really speak to what we would do with our customers outside of the company.
I think you heard last week when you were in New Johnsonville, and that as we've worked through this situation over the last number of months, that our sales force has been very actively engaged with that. Now that was something that we didn't institute, but they've been very much engaged with our customers, talking to them regularly, setting expectations, making adjustments where adjustments needed to be made in those expectations, asking them, how desperate are things? Can you wait, or do we need to get a delivery to you tomorrow? That's just the way we deal with customers. Unlike the railroads, we have competitors that operate in this country and that operate around the world that are knocking at the door, so to speak. And we understand very clearly that a failure on our part to satisfy their expectations opens that door for somebody else to take that business. And customers are precious to us. And we do extraordinary things sometimes to make sure that they're not impacted either by things we do or things that are thrust upon us, as the case might be. Is that responsive to your question?
One of the things Mr. Harrison was explaining was that in precision railroading, each car has a plan. And so something I took away, perhaps I misunderstood and can be straightened out later, but one of the measures of success is, are the majority of those cars meeting their plan? And what I'm curious about, as shippers, do you know what the plan is for your car? I mean, is that something that you know? Do you have input into the plan?
I was not aware that each car had its own individual plan. I've not seen any plan for any of the cars we move. That sounds really great to me. I hope somehow we get included in that discussion.
So I was aware that it does have a plan, or they do have a plan, and that they will measure to that. We also track our cars through a independent software, third party, and we typically will rely on what that estimate is versus the railroad's estimate when we think this thing's going to roll, because we think it's better history.
So in some ways you kind of developed your own plan based on sort of the history that you know, so that...
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mr. Scott, I'm curious, do you know what the plan is for your cars?
No, ma'am. We have a standing order for inbound ship hoppers. It's a certain number every time, and I just look at the en route list report, comes by email me every morning, and I just read that accordingly. As far as the flat cars, you'll see when they hit the order. They might be in multiple states away, and you can follow them until they get to you. And the ping pong that y'all were talking about earlier, I've seen that with my cars. My chip hoppers are unloaded in Brunswick, Georgia, or Charleston, South Carolina. I have seen them end up in Kentucky, in Virginia, all over the southeast before they come back to me empty. But as far as the system they were talking about, I had no knowledge of it.
Ms. Powers?
Similar to Cargill's comments, we track our cars through an external service, so we know typically transit times. You know, we see within the CSX system, we know historically which yards they go to. So we look at that as far as a plan for each car, and if that plan is changing, that's never been communicated to us. We're still tracking through a third-party logistics provider and our own internal methods. So we raise inquiries when we see them going to places that make absolutely no sense to try and get them routed back to the correct way.
This is maybe a naive question, but how do you know when a car's gone someplace that,
Well, so,
particularly if it's a place that doesn't make sense to you?
well, so we get chlorine in from Buffalo. Ashtabula is only a couple hours. We're right up on Lake Erie, and we'll see the car heading to Cincinnati. That's not a logical move.
Are you getting that information from the railroad, though, or from your third-party logistic?
We can see it in both places. Typically, we see it first with because our third-party logistics provider has those relationships with the railroad, so they're tracking all of our cars, whether they're on CSX or another railroad, and that makes it a convenient place for us to view them.
So this isn't an independent tracking tool. This is through Steel Roads, which is information that the CSX provides via RailLink, I believe, that updates Steel Roads, and then this software that we use pulls the information in from Steel Roads.
I see.
So we have an exception report that comes out of this third-party software that will tell us if a car has sat for more than 2 days. So then we can call the railroad and say, what gives with these cars? But it comes from the railroad, it comes from the CSX, fed to RailLink, which then feeds Steel Roads.
You know, one of the things that I'd just like to offer on CSX's behalf, you know, because we have a number of other panels after you, but, you know, each of you have your own story, and it's an important story. And to the extent that you haven't had enough, or you don't know, look, I mean, I know Cargill, Comores, Dow, you know who to, you can ring up Mr. Harrison if you really need to. Mr. Scott, you probably won't take that opportunity. But there are a number of CSX employees in this office, in this room. I hope they will make sure that they each will someone will talk to each of the witnesses who are here today to offer any assistance that they can give. Because when CSX comes up at the end, they're not going to be able to probably go through every single comment that they hear today. But I took Mr. Harrison at his word that he wants service to be good and improved, and I think he definitely has the message on customer service. So if, I don't know, maybe later we'll have a show of hands if people haven't talked, but please, CSX team, speak with everyone here before you leave. Thank you.
So can I sort of, in a summarizing way, and then, I don't know, by nodding your head or whatever, let me know if I got the message incorrectly. Broadly, some of you very specifically said service is better now than it was, say, perhaps August might have been sort of the worst. But I also hear some skepticism maybe isn't the right word, but you know, you're going to hold your judgment until you just get a little more information. Is that sort of a correct takeaway, or would some of you say, hey, I'm not even seeing better service yet?
I think you need to define what you mean by service. Is it from, you know, spotting at the facility to our customer getting the car when and where they need it? Or is it when the car gets loaded?
All of those things, right?
Yeah, so I would say that, again, once it hits the road and starts moving and then coming back, that velocity and or the turn times that we're seeing are now average and have improved. I will say that, again, local service, whether it be at our facility or our customer's facility, is nowhere near where it needs to be,
and has
gotten worse.
Crews? Or
Crews.
Is that the reason?
Crews.
And again, sorry, just to be sure I'm not misunderstanding, you're saying there aren't enough of them. I mean, that's your perception, that the crews are too
For
skinny.
the timeout.
That's correct.
And Ms. Powers, it sounded like you were saying you're not seeing improvement in your service.
If anything, it has actually gotten worse in September and early October. Both the local yard and our inbounds and the accuracy of what they're placing at our plants is right now, it's a very miserable time trying to deal with them. And especially with the very short notice that we received with canceling our leased track space and threatening the embargo of our cars. 30 days to try and find sufficient track space is very difficult.
Ms. Powers, can you where are your locations?
Yeah.
We're currently just in Asheville, Ohio. Our company, Crystal, is being acquired by Tronex, a competitor of Chemours. So we have 3 sites in Asheville, Ohio.
From a Dow standpoint, we've seen improvement versus where we were at in the summer. It's hard to tell if that's based on, at least from our standpoint, the amount of extra effort that we're putting towards, tracking through a similar system to then anticipate. And we're on heightened alert now, so our people are working extra hard to try to understand where the material is and make adjustments. I would say there was improvement in a particular area around the Avon, Indiana yard, hump yard being put back in service, and so that particular area we have seen some improvement. Overall, not at the level of history.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Scott, what about you?
Well, for the last 2 weeks, I'll give you an example. I haven't seen any improvement. Just yesterday, the train worked me. They pulled 3 cars that were not loaded. Pulled them out of my facility before I had a chance to load them. Put me 2 of somebody else's cars in there that were loaded. That's just yesterday. Last week, Monday of last week, they brought me 20 cars, of which they left 11 and pulled 9 onto Charleston, South Carolina. Tuesday, the train came and brought 0 cars. That's just an example of the last 2 weeks. I can't say I've seen any improvement.
Your comments do characterize what we are seeing at our New Johnsonville site.
Well, thank you all. Greatly appreciate your comments.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for scheduling purposes, we will now have panel 2. And after this panel, we will break for an hour lunch. The reason we have to take a full hour, as you know how much time it took you just to get in the building. You'll have to leave your badges, you will have to come back in and go through security.
Sorry.
So we do apologize, but we think that, this is certainly a really helpful discussion for us, and we don't want to rush it at all. I believe someone had a scheduling conflict later in the afternoon, so Mr. Cal, I think you were going to join this. Please, you're certainly welcome. We'll get you a badge later. We know who he is, it's fine. We're good.
Well, it might help the people who were
that's
on
true.
the webcam.
Okay. We'll get it in just a moment. All right, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I should actually announce the panel. I apologize. The panel consists of Kellogg Company, Murray Energy Corporation, Occidental Chemical Corporation, Olin, and Packaging Corporation of America, as well as the American Chemistry Council.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Moss-Hyam, and I'm the Senior Vice President. Sorry. Good morning. My
Red light. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Moss-Hyam. I'm the Senior Vice President of Distribution and Operations for the Kellogg Company Snacks Supply Chain. I want to thank Chairwoman Begeman and Vice Chair Miller for calling this listening session and for the opportunity to speak with you today about the service issues our company is experiencing as a result of changes made by the CSX Transportation. We acknowledge and appreciate the action the board has taken to date. However, we remain very concerned about the impact to our operations as a result of the prolonged degradation in CSX rail service. My remarks today will focus on how the deterioration in service has disrupted our supply chain. As background, Kellogg Company was founded 111 years ago by W.K. Kellogg, who created an entire industry on a single grain, corn. And over the years, Kellogg has grown to be the world's leading cereal company, the second largest producer of snacks, and a leading North America frozen foods manufacturer. Kellogg is a major U.S. employer and makes a wide variety of products at manufacturing facilities across the United States. Like other food companies, we rely on numerous suppliers to ensure we have the ingredients needed to make the foods people love. Unanticipated service issues jeopardize our production, which ultimately may impact our customers and consumers in the form of delayed deliveries and higher costs. Our ingredients are supplied by companies throughout the U.S., many of which are located great distances from our plants. For most of our network, rail service is a faster, more economical, and reliable mode of delivery for our ingredients, and Kellogg is committed to using rail service as part of its business model. Up until 5 months ago, the rail service we received from CSX was consistent. Unfortunately, the business decisions made by CSX have caused its service to our suppliers and our plants to be slow and unreliable. Specifically, Kellogg has experienced significant increases in train transit times, inefficient car routings and congestion, and inconsistent switching operations. This degradation in service has resulted in increased cost and disruption to the Kellogg manufacturing network. In fact, just 10 days ago, we were forced to shut down lines at our manufacturing plant in North Carolina. Our Pringles plant has been hit the hardest as a result of the changes CSX is making to its operations. And the remainder of my remarks today will focus on the first-hand CSX service issues we continue to experience. To insist in the board's understanding of the significance of the Kellogg's Pringle plant, which is the biggest plant impacted by CSX, Kellogg is one of Jackson, Tennessee's top employers, providing employment to over 1,300 individuals. Kellogg's investment in employment and wages for these individuals total nearly $100 million annually. This plant makes approximately 85 million cases of Pringles that are shipped across the world. The ingredients, packaging, and finished product materials to make Pringles at this plant are sourced from over 100 different suppliers across the United States. The Jackson, Tennessee plant is the only plant that makes Pringles for the United States, Canada, Mexico, and most of South America. And regarding rail, the plant operates a fleet of approximately 300 private rail cars to source over 308 million pounds of bulk ingredients, which are the primary components to make Pringles. The Jackson plant is completely dependent on rail service for the delivery and receipt of the major Pringles ingredients. The plant was built with equipment that receives the dry ingredients through rail cars. The ingredients are pneumatically conveyed from the rail cars directly into the plant. Our Pringles plant is also entirely dependent on CSX for inbound and outbound service east of the Mississippi River. As a result, our primary ingredients are shipped by rail to the Jackson plant exclusively by CSX. Kellogg does not have the option to use a different rail carrier to mitigate the impact of any rail service disruptions. Given our complete and total reliance on rail and CSX, it is absolutely critical that they deliver all of our required ingredients through reliable and on-time service. While CSX may have improved service for some customers, it appears they are doing so at the expense of captive customers like Kellogg. By example, they recently terminated two agreements that allowed the Pringles plant to store full rail cars at an off-site rail yard so that they could use that space for other customers. The termination of this storage facility forced Kellogg to find alternative space for our ingredient cars. Because we are captive to CSX, this change will increase our switching costs by at least 4 times the amount we would have paid under prior agreements. This arrangement will further complicate the logistics of our inbound ingredients due to increased lead times. Since May, CSX service to the Pringles plant has been plagued by a host of problems, including misrouted cars, significant and often unexplained delays of cars, inconsistent and unreliable switching operations, and lack of communication from CSX as to the explanation for the problem or how or when it will be fixed going forward. Over the 5-month period from May through September, Kellogg reported numerous instances of misrouted cars. Examples include cars en route to Jackson, Tennessee from Illinois, turning up in Idaho, cars being routed from Arkansas to Tennessee, showing up in Cincinnati, cars in Nashville traveling to Jackson, showing up in Kentucky, and cars sitting at the plant empty while CSX shows them full in Indiana. Such out-of-route rail cars cause significant delays in both inbound and outbound shipments. During the same period, transit times for cars have increased significantly. Prior to May 2017, our transit time for roughly 100 inbound cars per month averaged between 12 to 16 days, depending on the specific route. However, since mid-May, 2/3 of our inbound routes have experienced transit times of at least 17 to 21 days, with many routes seeing transit times of 25 days or more. On the outbound side, where our empty cars are routed back to our suppliers to be refilled, we witness similar increase in transit times where many cars are reported en route for as long as a month. The delays in outbound empty rail cars actually exacerbates the delay on the inbound side, as our suppliers are unable to ship our required ingredients until they receive the cars they need to fill. CSX is not effectively addressing the resolution of these service issues. They have mandated that any problems be reported using their customer hotline or online inquiry system, where all of their responses to our inquiries regarding the service issues have been ad hoc, incomplete, and wholly inadequate. In essence, CSX effort has not been effective to solve the myriad of service deficiencies as they relate to the Pringles plant. At Kellogg, we have a team of highly competent professionals who are well-trained in transportation logistics. Fortunately, this team has been able to prevent a shutdown of the Pringles plant, but not without significant cost impact. To keep the plant running, Kellogg has been forced to use bulk trucking, which is more expensive in 2 ways. First, bulk trucking is at least 3 times the cost of rail service. And second, all bulk truck deliveries must be transloaded to rail cars to supply the plant, causing Kellogg to incur additional inefficiencies and incremental cost. As a result of our freight costs for the Pringles ingredients, our costs have risen by nearly 20% over the past few months. This cost increase does not include bulk trucking of the most important ingredient for Pringles, potato flakes. To hedge the supply risk to potato flakes, we have increased our inventory on hand where feasible, which has also impacted our cost. Should the CSX situation worsen, however, even in the slightest, and our potato flakes are implicated, our shipping costs could skyrocket. Bulk trucking is only a temporary mitigating action. It is not a sustainable long-term option for the Pringles plant. In closing, CSX rail service disruption is jeopardizing the continuity of supply on ingredients to our business. We are concerned that ongoing supply disruption will negatively impact our ability to service our customers and consumers. We very much appreciate the opportunity to bring these issues to the board's attention, and look forward to reaching a constructive solution to Kellogg's problem as a shipper captive to CSX. Thank you, Chairwoman Begeman, for your earlier comment. I would welcome a call from Hunter Harrison or a CSX official to fix our service issues.
Mr. Murray.
Yes. Madam Chairwoman and Commissioner Miller, thank you for holding this hearing and for having me here today. My name is Robert Edward Murray. Is that better? All right. My name is Robert Edward Murray, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Marketing and Sales for Murray Energy Corporation. Murray Energy Corporation is a private coal mining and sales company, and the Murray family is the ownership of Murray Energy. We appear before the Surface Transportation Board today in order to focus the attention of the STB on the unacceptable rail transportation delays which have been experienced by the operating companies of Murray Energy in moving our coal to our electric utility customers on the CSX railroad system. We were forced to file civil litigation as well as take various other actions before the board to redress this. These delays created significant obstacles, preventing or slowing both the loading of coal by Murray Energy's operating companies and the transportation of coal by CSX to our electric utility customers. As a result, the delays had an extremely negative and substantially damaging impact on the operating success of Murray Energy. Murray Energy is the largest privately owned coal mining company in the United States, operating mines in 12 mining complexes located in 3 of the major coal producing regions of Northern Appalachia, the Illinois Basin, and the Uinta Basin in Utah. Consolidation Coal Company, which is a subsidiary of Murray Energy, operates coal mines in the Northern Appalachian region. As such, Consolidation Coal has entered into coal supply contracts with various purchasers to supply coal from our 5 very large mines in West Virginia. Similarly, Foresight Energy LLC, another subsidiary of Murray Energy, operates 3 large mines in the Illinois Basin through its subsidiary Sugar Camp Energy LLC. Foresight Coal Sales LLC, a subsidiary of Foresight Energy LLC, acts as the contracting agent for Sugar Camp for the purpose of entering into coal supply contracts and selling coal to various customers. The availability of reliable rail transportation for the delivery of our coal to our customers is absolutely essential for Murray Energy and its subsidiary companies. The timely receipt of coal is of equal importance to our electric utility customers. For much of the last 3 years, Murray Energy has experienced severe and unacceptable delays in transporting its coal to customers due to innumerable service delays and failures by the CSX, which I will describe herewith. Over the past several years, our staff has proactively engaged CSX personnel at all levels, from the hands-on logistical level to the highest executive levels, to express Murray Energy's dissatisfaction with CSX's service inadequacies and to discuss options to remedy this critical situation. Quite frankly, at the outset, CSX did not want our input. They didn't want our advice. They didn't want any criticism from Murray Energy. Murray Energy's efforts to communicate with CSX to improve service included daily and weekly meetings or conference calls, daily. Unfortunately, these efforts were not initially successful in improving CSX's rail service to our coal mining operations in any significant way, but the communication has improved, and I'll come back to that. But at the outset, it was disastrous. In fact, they could not even organize a daily conference call. They committed to have these daily conference calls, and there were times when I was the only one on the call or our employees were the only ones on the call. But that has since improved. In the face of continuing rail service delays,
Mr. Murray, excuse me.
Yes, ma'am?
Just for clarification's sake, are you saying those daily conference calls started after the precision railroading?
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
It didn't predate that, okay.
That's correct, yes, ma'am. In the face of continuing rail service delays, Murray Energy could not sit idly by and let CSX continue to harm our company and to alienate our customers. We were forced to take action. As a result, on August 11, 2017, certain operating subsidiaries of Murray Energy filed 2 separate complaints with the STB, seeking intervention by the board to address the service issues. Additionally, on August 17, 2017, we directed a letter to the board requesting that the board invoke its emergency powers to address the serious service disruptions. Finally, on August 21st, 2017, several operating companies of Murray Energy requested that the board institute a formal proceeding to investigate CSX's rail service delays and hold a public hearing on the rail service delays. In addition to the actions before the STB, Murray Energy filed 2 civil lawsuits against CSX on July 31st, 2017, seeking monetary damages. The first such lawsuit is currently pending in Missouri, and the second lawsuit is pending in West Virginia. The following is a summary of certain of the service deficiencies caused by CSX over the past 3 years, and there are 7. Number 1, CSX failing to participate in regular coordination calls with Murray Energy and our customers, which I mentioned earlier. Number 2, CSX failing to provide trains in accordance with the schedule agreed to in CSX's own web-based reservation system for coal companies, for coal shipments. Number 3, CSX failing to provide crews to operate trains in accordance with the schedule agreed to in CSX's own web-based reservation system. Number 4, CSX failing to pull loaded coal trains on schedule. Number 5, CSX arbitrarily delaying trains transporting coal while en route to the customer. Number 6, CSX prioritizing shipments of other goods over the transportation of coal. And finally, number 7, CSX failing to communicate with Murray Energy to coordinate basic information relating to shipments and CSX service problems. In sum, these service issues constituted an addiction by CSX of providing rail service to Murray Energy and the coal industry in general is inconsistent with the exclusive charter and monopoly granted railroads in the United States to ship goods and commodities in interstate commerce under Title 49 United States Codes Section 11101 and 11121 sub A sub 1. The specific remedies requested by Murray Energy in 2 complaints filed on August 11 before the STB include, and there are 6 such remedies. Number 1, directing CSX to participate in daily coordination calls with our electric utility customers. Number 2, requiring CSX to provide sufficient equipment, including the 4 locomotives needed at their Evansville, Indiana yard, and trains to timely transport the coal requested by Murray Energy, as scheduled and confirmed by CSX's web-based reservation system. Number 3, directing CSX to establish reasonable rules and practices to complete crew changes so that the departure of crews from the train occurs simultaneously with the next crew arriving at the train. Number 4, directing CSX to establish reasonable rules and practices to prevent the storage of trains on side tracks for periods greater than 24 hours. Number 5, directing CSX to establish reasonable rules and practices to meaningfully address the service inadequacies experienced by Murray Energy. And number 6, directing CSX to establish reasonable rules and practices to develop an adequate power plan to maintain an uninterrupted supply chain. I believe those are 6 very reasonable requests. As a direct result of Murray Energy initiating proceedings before the STB
and filing these civil lawsuits, senior level executives of Murray Energy and CSX have conferred by telephone and by letter in recent days regarding the resolution of rail service issues being experienced by Murray Energy and for the implementation of service improvements by CSX in areas of communications, equipment, and cycle times. These discussions have been conducted in good faith by Murray Energy and by the CSX. And while we are unable to report that progress has been made towards reaching a mutual agreement for the identification and implementation of important service improvements for our coal mines in West Virginia and Southern Illinois, there remains a gap between what we believe is necessary to resolve the rail transportation delays experienced by Murray Energy and what CSX is willing to commit to do in order to address those delays. In summary, Murray Energy continues to experience rail transportation delays in loading and transporting coal by CSX's trains to its customers. From a positive standpoint, we have seen certain improvements in recent weeks with the cycle times of CSX trains, and senior level executives of CSX have made assurances to Murray Energy of CSX continued commitment to continue improvements in the areas of communication and cycle times. However, as I previously noted, there still remains a gap between what we believe is necessary to resolve the rail transportation delays being experienced by Murray Energy and what CSX is willing to commit to do to address them. On behalf of our over 6,000 coal miners and those who depend on our coal mines and coal miners for their lives and livelihoods, I thank you for conducting this hearing and for your attention to this matter. And my comments have been submitted in writing to the STB. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Burns?
Good afternoon. Occidental Chemical Corporation, or OxyChem, is a leading manufacturer of chemicals which are the building blocks for a range of products essential to public health and modern life. OxyChem employs approximately 4,000 employees and contractors at 22 domestic locations. Our products are used in water purification, medical supplies, pharmaceuticals, agricultural chemicals, and de-icing applications, all vital to the United States economy. Over the past several months, OxyChem has experienced significant CSX service disruptions at multiple locations. These disruptions include increased transit times, ping-ponging of rail cars, and reduced switching. In addition, we have received limited communications and last-minute notifications, further compounding our operational issues. From June to August, we saw our CSX service issue logs more than triple. In June, we filed 10 service logs. This number climbed to 33 in July and 37 in August. Shutdown situations accounted for 7 of those logs. During this time, we were forced to schedule over 100 truck shipments to ensure our customers could continue operating. Fortunately, several shutdown situations were avoided. Although we experienced significant CSX service issues across our entire network, the yards that have created the most significant issues were Nashville, Cincinnati, Birmingham, Montgomery, Terre Haute, Indiana, and Hamlet, North Carolina. The Nashville yard has been particularly problematic and has created issues for our chlor-alkali facility in New Johnsonville, Tennessee. Prior to CSX implementation of precision scheduled railroading, this facility received 7 switches per week. In June and July, we received an average of only 2 to 3 switches. This change in switching impacted our plant operations and created significant issues across our supply chain. In late August, the number of switches improved to 4 switches per week, and finally in September, it returned to 7 switches. Although switching services are back to regular weekly levels, the weeks of limited switches have significantly impacted our network. Transit times out of the New Johnsonville plant increased by 9 days per trip, or 42%. This additional transit time requires a 22% increase in caustic soda rail cars over what is normally required to manage this business. 1 month after we experienced issues at our New Johnsonville facility, we started seeing increased transit times at our Niagara Falls, New York plant. We believe the timing of these issues coincided with the CSX implementation of precision scheduled railroading as these changes moved north. Our primary concern at this facility were shipments between Niagara Falls and Sauget, Illinois, which incurred significant delays in interchange outside of East St. Louis. As I mentioned earlier, we experienced a significant ping-ponging of our cars, where cars are moving but not necessarily in the right direction. In June, customers started calling to check on car status as cars were not arriving per the delivery date. As we dug into the issues, we discovered that several of our cars were nowhere along their normal route. CSX stated that they were dealing with congestion and were routing cars differently and circling them because some yards were full. As you are well aware, OxyChem produces chlorine, which is considered a TIH material. It typically takes 12 days for a rail car from our Niagara Falls plant to be delivered to one of our customers in North Carolina. In one instance, a TIH rail car took 31 days to make that trip. During this time, the car was tracked in 3 different states outside of its normal route. This is particularly disturbing as TIH materials are expected to take the safest and most secure route and with direct custody of the car required during the entire transit. We are increasingly concerned with CSX plans to convert additional hump yards to flat switching. The Selkirk yard is a very large interchange point for our northern plants with over 350 loaded and empty car shipments per month transitioning through this yard. Considering the number of issues that we experienced in the yards recently transitioned to flat switch yards, we are very concerned about any Selkirk transition. We have heard conflicting reports about the plans for this yard and expect a better understanding of the timing and the plans. We continue to be concerned with Chicago as well. Chicago is a key interchange to all other railroads. Issues with CSX will quickly ripple to all other Class 1s, and when compounded with any significant winter weather, this could create a total traffic meltdown. I am also very concerned regarding Hunter's comments about CSX not participating in the CTCO. Over the past several months, we have seen a significant turnover of CSX personnel familiar with OxyChem. We believe this has contributed to the communication issues, including incomplete information. When we do get information, it is often without warning, and many of these communications leave little to no time for us to adapt. In addition to service issues that we have experienced, CSX has been aggressively canceling lease track contracts. Although this is within their contract rights, the limited advance notice that we received has created significant impacts to our supply chain. Losing hundreds of spots for storage create a huge ripple effect across an organization as you need to figure out where best to store cars. We expect more out of a large, long-term supplier than what CSX has provided with these cancellations. OxyChem has experienced a slight improvement in service during the month of September. We are seeing fewer and shorter delays, and our tracing and tracking are showing less ping-ponging of cars. In addition, switching has been more consistent than what we experienced earlier in the summer. Our metrics indicate that although improved, the service levels are still unacceptable and not back to pre-precision scheduled railroading levels. As a reference point, the transit time for our new Johnsonville facility has improved 3 to 4 days during the month of September. However, this is still 6 days worse than our typical transit times. We filed 10 CSX service logs during the month of September, down from the high of 37 in August. However, one of these logs was a shutdown log, which was only avoided due to scheduling of trucks. Both of these data points do indicate improvement, but CSX service is clearly still not at an acceptable level. We are very appreciative for the assistance that we have received from the Rail Customer and Public Assistance Program. We are anxious to find immediate solutions to restore improved service levels. However, we are equally interested in ensuring that plans are in place to prevent issues such as these in the future. We request that the board continue to stay engaged by monitoring CSX performance. Continuity in metrics is important for us to be able to compare apples to apples and gauge performance. Although CSX may implement new metrics, it is important that we continue to see the standard common metrics which all railroads report so that we can track historical and current status. We also believe that any railroad that is contemplating such a significant change to their operations must first present their plans to the STB, including timeline, impacts to the customers, and communication plans before these changes are allowed to move forward in the future. OxyChem is grateful for the opportunity to comment during today's hearing and share our story.
Thank you. Mr. Dooley?
Thank you, Chairwoman Begeman and Commissioner Deb Miller, for the opportunity to testify today, and I'll submit my written statement for the record and abbreviate my remarks. I'm Cal Dooley, and I'm President and CEO of the American Chemistry Council, and I appreciate the opportunity that you provided for a number of our member companies to make testimony today. You know, there's probably not another industry in the country that is more dependent on having a very efficient and effective rail transportation system. And the chemical industry right now is really poised on an unprecedented era of growth in the United States. Because of the increased supplies of natural gas, which is a feedstock to our industry, we're seeing a flood of new investment in manufacturing of chemicals in the United States. We keep a running total at ACC of these new investments, and now there are about 310 new facilities that are being constructed that constitute about a $185 billion in new capital investment. According to the Commerce Department statistics, if you go back to 2016, was 48, almost 50% of all investment in manufacturing in the United States was constituted by the chemical industry. And when you extrapolate that out in terms of what it's going to mean in terms of additional shipments, we did some work with PwC, and we expect in the next few years 1.8 million additional truckload shipments, or volume-wise, for the chemical industry with this new investment. So we need, again, a very effective and functioning rail system. You know, we had great concerns, as did every shipper. I think that constituency that is testifying today that has been dealing with CSX over the last few months. ACC has been a major force in trying to develop what we call the Rail Customer Coalition. You'll be hearing from another representative of them. In August or late July of last year, we submitted a letter to Mr. Harrison and CSX explaining some of our concerns in terms of some of the service problems that you've heard very consistently from every shipper group today. It was very remarkable to me that on August 16th, I received a response from Mr. Harrison to that letter that was signed by over 25 different rail shipper customers. In his response to it, he said that the concerns raised by ACC and a broad group of other rail shipper organizations were unfounded and greatly exaggerated. And the testimony you're hearing today is a validation that those concerns we were pointing out were clearly well substantiated. But in many respects, we look at it as almost a validation of the challenge that we face as a rail customer here. Is a CEO of a service provider that basically would challenge his customers and criticize them as making unfounded and greatly exaggerated concerns about service is a reflection of being insulated from the competitive pressures of the marketplace. And I won't go further in to articulate some of the concerns that our member companies have already articulated in terms of the service problems we face. I'd rather segue into where we think STB has a role to continue to play and even enhance to ensure that we can be more effective in how we're addressing service problems such as we experienced with CSX in the past and potentially in the future. I want to first off acknowledge some of the terrific work that STB has done with your rail customer assistance program. Your staff has just been terrific in terms of being very, very responsive and working with individual shippers. And I think this listening session is also a sign that STB realizes that you have an important role to play here. But the board must also consider proactive long-term actions to help prevent and mitigate the next crisis. And a couple of recommendations. First, we urge the board to utilize its congressionally authorized authority to investigate the underlying causes of CSX service disruptions as well as the long-term impacts of its operational changes. With fewer switch yards, fewer operations personnel, and fewer customer services resource, ACC members question whether CSX rail network is sufficiently resilient against emergency situations or even coming winter weather. We had a situation in August when we had Hurricane Harvey that because of the failure of one company to receive their normal car shipments, they would have been fully prepared to maintain their operations during Hurricane Harvey, they had to shut down their facility because of some of the failure of the service of CSX. In a formal STB investigation, your authority you have there is one very viable way to answer many of those questions. Second, STB should reconsider its procedures for providing emergency service relief. While an individual shipper may petition the STB for an emergency order on a specific issue, this complex and piecemeal approach simply is not designed to alleviate the type of widespread service disruptions experienced across the CSX network. The board should adopt an expedited process to provide alternative service options to groups of impacted shippers when a carrier is experiencing regional or system-wide service problems. And finally, we urge the board to address fundamental problems of outdated policies that insulate railroads from market forces. CSX indifference to its customers would be almost unmanageable for any company operating in a truly competitive environment. The reality is most ACC members that ship or receive materials on CSX have no competitive transportation options available to them. And one of the best ways for STB to head off future service problems would be to enact overdue reforms and promote greater rail-to-rail competition. I believe very strongly that Congress sent a very strong message to STB with its reauthorization of the STB Act a couple of years ago, that they expect STB to be more aggressive in using their authority to ensure greater competition in the rail shipping marketplace. The competition offers a far better way to address rail customer concerns and government intervention, and can lead to innovation and increased efficiency, just as it does throughout all sectors of the U.S. economy. I listened to Mr. Harrison's comments this morning in one area which I thought we might have a lot of agreement or potential for agreement, and that's when he talked about the shipper protocol, where he recognized sometimes that cars are not moving in the most cost-effective or effective way. We think very strongly with one of the dockets you have in front of you today, with the reciprocal switching, this is a mechanism and a tool that could actually contribute to an objective that would be similar to the shipping protocol as articulated by Hunter Harrison. So thank you again for holding this session. If I could leave one thought with you, it would be this: the board should not consider its job done until STB has ensured an environment where rail shippers have meaningful competitive options, are never forced to accept unacceptable service. Thank you.
Chairwoman Begeman and Vice Chair Miller, thank you for allowing rail shippers such as Olin the opportunity to share with you our most recent struggles with the railroad industry. My name is Tom Terabasi. I'm the Director of North American Logistics for Olin Chlor-Alkali Products and Vinyls. Today I'm testifying on behalf of Olin, which is headquartered in Clayton, Missouri. After acquiring assets from the Dow Chemical Corporation in 2015, Olin is now the world's largest producer of chlorine and associated products. Chlorine chemistry is essential to everyday life. The products of chlorine chemistry make possible clean drinking water, safe foods, pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, construction materials, computers, electronics, automobiles, clothing, sporting equipment, agriculture, and many more. Much of what we produce must move on the rail network, and as was demonstrated during the positive train control crisis of 2015, failure to effectively distribute these commodities in the marketplace poses an existential threat to the health and safety and to the broader economy. To be respectful of your time, I don't plan to go into detail on each of the 87 inquiries Olin has filed over the last 90 days related to CSX rail service issues. Rather, I will focus my remarks on a few notable and, in some cases, alarming examples. The first notable case is what initially compelled Olin to contact the STB Rail Customer Assistance Program. On July 13th of 2017, CSX was in possession of 25 rail cars, 5 of which were chlorine and 20 caustic soda, in the Mobile, Alabama yard. These cars were destined for 3 Olin customers who faced shutdown situations, since these cars had been held in Mobile since June 25th. numerous contacts with CSX customer service were ineffective. The situation was finally resolved after CSX Vice President Michael Rutherford became personally involved to get the cars moving. Olin was very appreciative of Mr. Rutherford's involvement, but at the same time, we were concerned that this situation necessitated it. Previous contacts in the CSX chain of command were of no help. Prior to the CSX operating changes, Olin was a premier shipper with CSX, and we enjoyed a helpful relationship with CSX customer service. That service is now non-existent. Sales and marketing personnel have replaced the mechanism that was formerly in place to troubleshoot and resolve rail issues. CSX has simply deprioritized customer service under the supposed precision scheduled railroading model, and this shows no sign of improving. Unfortunately, the situation continued to deteriorate after our first complaint. The second case occurred on August 22nd, when CSX lost a loaded chlorine rail car while in their custody and control. After repeated Olin inquiries, the subject TIH load was finally located in a CSX yard. It is my firm belief that from August 22nd through 25th, CSX had no earthly idea where this TIH load was located. I'm sure you can appreciate the serious security concern this evidences. The next notable case occurred when a TIH chlorine rail car arrived at the Rose Lake Yard on August 8th and didn't depart until August 25th, a full 17 days after its arrival at that yard. To add insult to injury, after repeatedly informing CSX of this customer supply disruption, CSX finally informed Olin on August 18th the car would depart on August 23rd, freely acknowledging they intended to hold this car another 5 days in that yard. My final example of our 87 inquiries in 90 days is unfortunately typical of the level of customer service we have been provided by CSX. On August 5th, an Olin perchloroethylene load arrived at the East St. Louis yard. This load did not depart that yard until August 24th, 19 days later. Telling in this case was the fact Olin was informed by CSX that the load would depart on third shift on 5 different occasions. They finally got it right on the last one. As Olin Corporation has testified in the past, our company has significant captivity issues. In fact, all of Olin's origins are captive to a single railroad. Recently, CSX service cuts and massive disinvestment have caused a tremendous strain on our logistics operation. It is disturbing that a railroad with a statutory common carrier obligation is able to take such dramatic action with little or no oversight from the government. Congress passed the STB Reauthorization Act of 2015, charging the board with the responsibility to investigate rail matters of regional and national significance. It is difficult to imagine a more appropriate instance to invoke this authority. It is also remarkable that a company like CSX can make such massive changes and cuts in service and staffing, and rather than see any pricing benefits, the customer actually sees price increases and deteriorating service. This simply would not be possible in a market economy, and is further evidence that STB should pursue pro-competitive, pro-market-based solutions. The customer service issues we are experiencing with CSX is only possible because CSX faces minimal competition in the marketplace. If our corporation or a competitor suffered systematic failure such as CSX has recently, we or our competitors would immediately move to take their market share. It seems that this has largely not happened in the case of CSX simply because most instances, customers have no other choice. This dynamic must be remedied, and the Surface Transportation Board is the only agency that has the responsibility and the statutory authority to make meaningful changes in the short term. That concludes my remarks. Again, thank you for your time.
Is that one working? All right. I got the trick chair, so be careful. Good afternoon, Acting Chairman Begeman and Vice Chair Miller. I want to thank you for holding this public listening session today and rail service problems involving CSX transportation, and for inviting the industry stakeholders here to share our recent experiences and concerns with the CSX service. Since both of you are familiar with myself and PCA, I'm going to skip the introduction. So let me start by stating that I'm only summarizing some of our issues and not providing any financial data since this is a public statement. PCA is currently and has been having many issues at our facilities, both at origination and destination, with CSX service and car supply starting in Q2 of this year. And I think you heard earlier, it's really that first mile and last mile that has been a significant issue for us. Most of our originating locations, paper mills, are served by short line carriers that interchange with a Class 1 railroad for furtherance. This is the case for our Filer City, Michigan plant that is served by CSX as the originating Class 1 carrier. This facility has not been receiving what has been a normal car supply since the middle of April. As an example, at our Filer City mill, CSX has reduced the maximum car order allowed to be well below our normal average and has forced PCA to transport finished goods by other modes at increased expense, and despite our clear preference for rail. So when ordering cars, there are times when the supply was drastically reduced from this average. Example, order 20, get 1. And times when CSX actually locked us out of the car management system so that the facility could not order any box cars at all. This does two things. One, it increases PCA's freight costs, and two, makes CSX's metric on car order fulfillment look substantially better than reality. I have included some examples of that in my written testimony. Next, I'll discuss some of the service issues we've been having at the receiving plants. I'll start with Florida, since it's been in the area where problems began and remain a concern today. Our Miami plant was the first to see crew and equipment cutbacks and immediate service issues. Missed switches at this plant started getting really bad the second week of April. These box cars contain rolls of liner and medium paper, which is combined and glued to make a box. When inventories got low, we moved 100% of our deliveries to truck and some intermodal for 2 weeks. And for the following 2 weeks, we were at 50% before getting back to closer to normal service. Just remember, it takes 2 to 3 trucks to haul what one rail car can haul. Not only was the plant missing complete switches, some switches only had 3 or 4 cars when the facility can unload 6, adversely affecting the efficiency of our operations. On May 9th, myself and other PCA managers went to Jacksonville to meet with CSX management to try to understand what operational changes were happening, what was the plan going forward, and how can PCA help the process and put in place a defined communication strategy. It was a worthwhile meeting, but it had little effect on the path going forward. My main contact was later reassigned, and I have not gotten a replacement name yet as of today. The plan was broadly summarized in an email we got on May 17th of network enhancements beginning on April 1st, over a month after the fact. Other PCA plants in Florida have similar stories, notably those located in Winter Haven and Jacksonville. And as the summer moved on, conditions rapidly degraded on movements to north of Florida. Our Honia Pass, South Carolina plant started having the same issues at the end of April. Plymouth, Michigan plant started seeing these issues beginning the middle of May. Richmond, Virginia plant was affected starting in July. So there are more examples, but let me emphasize one more point. It's a known fact that Packaging Corporation of America is a paper and forest products company that ships in boxcars. As such, we ship exempt commodities and do not have direct access to more formal processes and remedies of the Surface Transportation Board to address our service issues. I have some concern that our exempt status may influence the attention provided by CSX to our service issues and question whether they are honoring their common carrier obligation when it comes to car supply and switching services. Our exempt status would appear to place PCA at a disadvantage as compared to other non-exempt shippers using CSX. PCA is very concerned with the long-term impacts CSX's reduced service levels and believes that the board should more closely monitor the severe cutbacks in car supply, switches, and necessary operating personnel. Further, CSX should be required to add resources to help restore these service levels and work with its customers with respect to timing and impacts on planned operational changes. Our fear is that CSX intends the current atrocious service levels to become the new normal. In closing, I want to thank you for this opportunity to discuss this urgent matter. Although our supply chain for getting products out of our mills to our box plants has been severely disrupted for months due to CSX's poor service, we have done extraordinary things at elevated costs to make sure we service our customers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Sharon, a couple of shippers in the last panel had also had a situation that you're experiencing where your car storage contracts have been canceled. Could you just give us a sense of how many cars you are actually were storing on that site? I'm just curious, like if it's 4, if it's 40.
I would have to get you that specific number. Okay. I would have to give you the specific number. But we use 300, we manage 300 cars. So, and I don't know if that helps. We could talk to the complexity around moving those, but I would need to get back to you on the number.
All right. Thank you. So we shared a similar story, and for us, it's hundreds of cars.
And what did you do to address?
We're still doing.
What are you doing?
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find alternative space. In the meantime, we have a few contracts that they've allowed us to continue storing, but we went to a tariff rate that is significantly higher than a contract rate. But basically, we're looking for alternative storage locations. We've pulled cars out of those locations. We're trying to find storage within our own plants, but it has disrupted all 22 locations.
So this is probably maybe a question for CSX, but do they need the space for storage themselves, or is it space that's needed for the fluidity of the system?
I think we need to ask CSX, and I'm not sure that we've been told clearly what the plans are.
Mr. Dooley, you commented, I'm sorry I couldn't write down fast enough, but could you repeat the investment comments that you were making as far as your chemical companies or?
Yeah, because of the increased supplies of natural gas, which is basically a function of the enhancements in fracking technology, the U.S. chemical industry has gone from one of the highest cost manufacturers of chemicals to now among the world's lowest cost manufacturers. That's what's led to a flood of about $185 billion in new capital investment. 62% of that is foreign direct investment, so we're onshoring capital throughout the world into the United States. If you look at 2016 Department of Commerce figures that do a census on all manufacturing investment, accounted that the chemical industry accounted for 48% of all investment in manufacturing in the United States. That includes autos, food, you name it. It was 48% was our industry. And then the statistics on the increased shipments that we have done, and this was with a joint project we did with PwC, we made it a finding there that there was going to be, as a result of this increased manufacturing capacity, about 1.8 million additional truckload units that will be on an annual basis, which will lead to more barge demand, more truck demand, and more rail demand.
And of those investments, are they typically adding on to existing facilities, or are they establishing new locations?
It's a combination. There is some green starts that are occurring, but there's a significant amount which is an expansion of new facilities, and these are huge investments. A good example is the announcement by Shell to build a cracker outside of Pittsburgh is upwards of a $5 billion investment.
And I'm curious if you can comment on those, I guess, new starts, if you will. Are they locating those facilities on duly served locations, or are they?
Well, a good example is that a lot of those are being, about 70% of that investment, that 185, is in the Gulf region, where the heart of the chemical industry is currently located. So they are generally adjacent to a new or an existing facility that is served. Well, you heard some of our member companies overwhelmingly are captive shippers. But the Shell, one of their determinations on where to locate and make their new investment on a cracker, which is a $5 billion, that it had to be served by more than one rail line and also had to have access to barge traffic in order to try to, overcome some of the vulnerabilities to being captive to one rail line, which has had a significant adverse impact on the bottom line of a lot of our companies.
So I'm wondering, again, sort of a question to all of you. Did you have any communications from CSX before the precision railroading changes started to be made? I mean, did you read it in the newspaper, notice changes, and ask why it was going on, or did you have any communications to let you know there was going to be a change in operating?
I'll take that one. The answer is yes. I received an email 8:30 on a Thursday saying effective immediately, meaning tomorrow morning, that we would need from our CSX served location to have the full consist ready by 6 a.m. that morning. A change from over a decade of operating standard procedures that we have had. We didn't even have customer service staffing at 6 a.m. in that morning. A significant change, and that's one trivial example. We were able to work through it. We have now changed shifts and got things in place in order to in order to be able to be compliant with that request. But again, another good indication in a market-based economy, you don't have a service provider telling a service customer what they need to do with less than 24 hours notice. One example.
And do any of you, are you in a position like one of the earlier testifiers where you have had experience with CN and CP and?
So obviously I was the plant manager in Wisconsin during the WC takeover when Mr. Harrison was the head of that. So that's, I guess, a big concern that I'm leaving here with today is that I'm hearing that CN is the golden standard. And I can tell you, as I mentioned to you a month or so ago when we met, that Wisconsin is probably one of the least rail-friendly states that we ship in. Our facility up there today, from back then, has gone from about 80% rail shipment to right around 40 to 45% rail shipment. All the rest has gone to truck. So, yeah, it's real stable because we're shipping a lot by truck today that we never used to in the past. So.
And when you say, what term did you use, least rail, you didn't say friendly. Do you mean the rail service in Wisconsin is poor? Is that what you meant by your statement?
Well, it's from a rate and service is not too bad. We still miss some switches, but not as bad. But when you're only shipping half as many, it's a lot easier to kind of make those switches today. So it's not a state that likes you to ship rail. The steam market itself, let's put it that way.
So Deb, for us, the number or the volume that we do with CSX is so much greater than CN and CP. So I'm not sure even if it was the same impact, if it would feel the same. But from our perspective, I think a couple things. There's a lot of differences between the CSX railroad and the Canadian railroads, and that includes the type of rail cars, the unit trains, the geography, how they're moving, that sort of thing. But what we think is the biggest change is the speed of the transition. So if you look at what the Canadian railroads did, I think they did it in a much slower transition rate, and I think it was probably in years, not months. And so CSX has been so aggressive and so quick. What we have found is that even if you can get in touch with somebody within CSX, they don't know the plan even within CSX. And I think those employees were put in such a situation that the speed of change and the rate of change was so fast that they don't even understand it themselves, let alone could they communicate it to their customers.
If I may, we ship coal on the Norfolk Southern Railroad, rather large volume, actually more volume than what we ship on the CSX. Right now we're shipping about 8 to 10 million tons out of our Forsyth sugar camp operation on the CSX, and about something like 5 million tons maybe out of West Virginia from our Murray mines. Larger volumes at the Norfolk Southern. At our sugar camp complex just last month, when you compare the ratable schedules, the ratable shipments, we missed about 20 trains on the CSX last month. We didn't miss nearly that many on the Norfolk Southern and the CN combined, and we are serviced also by the CN as well.
Excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to emphasize that, you know, for us, it's really simple. We need to load the train on the day that it's scheduled to load.
Because if we miss that loading, we don't get it back. We don't get the time back. We're volume intensive, and there is no makeup. When we miss that hour, we miss that day, it's gone until next year, and we don't get to see it again. And you're looking at, 130 car train, you're looking at $500,000 worth of revenue, for our product. So it adds up quickly. And when you think about 20 trains, you can do the math. It's a lot of money. So my point, though, is that, we have, the question, I believe, as I heard it, was, do you experience similar situations with the other railroads? And my answer is no. And in fact, I was fortunate enough to have lunch with CEO Jim Squires in Columbus, Ohio last week, and I was happy to inform him that when he asked me the question, I was happy to inform that we were very pleased with their service up to this point. So.
I took it from your presentation that, maybe I should ask, did I understand this correctly, that a lot of your frustration with the railroad began long before precision railroading came into...
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. Yeah, it's been about 3 years worth of issues, significant issues.
Well, I think we were both happy to hear you say that at this point. The two sides, if you will, have been talking, have been having conversations.
Absolutely.
That is great to hear. We encourage it. We have a mediation program that we would be happy to assist you with if it came to that, although we also don't want to get in your way. But I commend both CSX as well and Murray Energy for... You have to talk to resolve issues.
That's absolutely correct. And I will say, to give credit where credit's due, they've been very responsive to our concerns, and they've been very willing to talk it out. But as I mentioned earlier, there is still a gap between what we believe is necessary and what they believe is necessary to achieve the same goal. That's the concern. But we'll keep the dialogue going for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Ms. Moss-Higham? I was just going to ask, as the Vice President of Distribution of Snacks, if you had any snacks to distribute here today.
I am more than happy to take care of everyone.
I was just thinking, as everyone is missing their lunch, it would be lovely to have snacks distributed.
Next trip.
Teasing you.
Well, with that, I think really thank you all very much. And Tom, I want to commend you on your excellent new hire.
Thank you.
Who
We're very happy.
was a former hire, one of my hires as well. So congratulations. And again, thank you all very much. And we will break for 1 hour. Be back here at 2 o'clock sharp, please. And thank you all, and see you soon.